Chapter 787. Perhaps Yurga's order was the best battle strategy for the Alliance wizards. Unfortunately, facing the onslaught of metal magical machinery, asking the wizards to fight bravely and sacrifice their lives to go against the flow and attack the heart of the enemy. Isn't this a little too much? A level 3 wizard like Yurga might be able to escape unscathed, but most of the level 1 wizards would definitely die. It was precisely because they understood this that the wizards of the Alliance scattered, all of them fleeing out of the wizard's pagoda without looking back. At a time like this, they might as well cast a spell to increase their movement speed if they had the energy to spare. As long as they could outrun their companions, they would have a high chance of escaping. There's no way we can escape. The door to the wizard's pagoda has already been sealed shut. Yurga's shrill, trembling voice could be heard clearly in the chaotic battlefield. But the Alliance wizards still charged down the wizard's pagoda without looking back. In the previous battle, the Alliance wizards had been reduced to 68 people. With this defeat, the low-grade wizards of the Unveil family were once again left behind on the battlefield. These level 1 wizards who had transformed into bloody mouths fought with all their might. They wanted to retreat, but they could not move an inch because of the magical machinery around them. They fought furiously while cursing the bastards who messed up their formation. Unfortunately, they were too close to the front. It was impossible for them to retreat now. The level 2 wizard from the Unveil family, Guante, watched with widened eyes as the wizards of his family fell into the enemy's formation, bitterly holding on under the attacks of countless magical machinery. After gritting their teeth for a long time, they finally let out a helpless sigh. Guante and Goulet looked at each other, then turned around and broke out of the encirclement. Seeing that the 2 level 2 wizards from the family had given up on them, the 4 level 1 wizards from the Unveil family, who had transformed into bloody mouths, felt a chill down their spines. Their movements slowed, and they were trampled by the swarm of magical machinery into a putrid mess of flesh and blood. At this point, other than the 2 level 2 wizards from the Unveil family, the rest of the wizards were dead. The second unlucky ones were the alchemy wizards from the demonic forest hut. They had always neglected physical training, and usually came in contact with highly toxic or highly radioactive sorcery materials. Their physical fitness was far inferior to other professional sorcerers. Thus, in the process of escaping, it was naturally left behind. The swarm of magic machines quickly flooded the position of the alchemy wizards. They didn't even have a chance to make a bubble before they were annihilated. Only the Tier 2 Magus Roy managed to escape the encirclement by relying on the protection of a few Tier 2 elemental servants. The wizards of the Alliance fled down 3 levels of the wizard's pagoda in one go. When they reached the hall on the first floor, they realized in horror that the door of the wizard's pagoda had closed once again. A translucent force field wall blocked their escape route. At this time, it was impossible for them to turn back and fight the magical armament. They had already lost the courage to fight. Seeing that the road ahead was blocked, they acted like those panic-stricken noble ladies and rushed to the front of the force field wall, frantically attacking it with witchcraft. As long as they could open a crack, they could escape. The temptation of life was right in front of them, making it difficult for them to control themselves. At the corner of the second level of the wizard's pagoda, Mary and the rest had used a short-distance teleportation spell to intercept the level 3 vampire Henniswick. As for the other level 3 wizard, Yurga, he passed through the neighboring battlefield as if he didn't see anything, not extending a helping hand to the old vampire. The Anti-Crimson Family Alliance had already collapsed. Even if they killed Mary and the rest, they wouldn't be able to turn the tide of the battle. Instead, they might as well take advantage of the time when Hennis was being held back by the enemy to retreat with the wizards of their family. Teams of metallic magic machines rumbled past them. Hennis turned into a bolt of blood-red lightning, weaving through the rain of bullets. Every time his crimson hands attacked, they would destroy a metallic magic machine. Mary, the Blood Knights, and the Blood Elves roamed around the perimeter of the battlefield, occasionally gathering together to launch a surprise attack on Hennis. As a vampire, Hennis wasn't adept at defense. Even though he was able to dodge most of the attacks from the magical machines with his agility, he was still cut open by the concentrated rain of bullet. If the magical machines had flesh, Hennis might be able to maintain his powerful offensive form by absorbing blood and regenerating. However, the metallic magic machines were made of metal and magical energy. They weren't creatures of flesh and blood. Thus, Hennis couldn't unleash most of his power in a battle against such creatures. He could only use brute force to destroy them one by one. Originally, as the descendants of Hennis' bloodline, Mary and the rest would find it hard to unleash their normal abilities in front of him. But now, with the mental barrier cast by Gru, the 6 high-level blood breeds were able to charge left and right in the midst of the magical machines, almost locked in combat. If it was just Mary and the rest, they might not be able to do anything to the level 3 Hennis. But now, with the support of the magical machines, the mental barrier cast by Gru, and the enhancement of the wizard's pagoda, Mary and the rest were able to keep Hennis occupied, trapping him in the 2nd level of the wizard's pagoda. Just like that, Hennis was separated from the wizards of the Alliance. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the wizard hall on the 1st level, and fireballs flew everywhere. After the defensive system of the wizard's pagoda was reactivated, the restrictions and barriers within it accompanied the wizards of the Alliance. The offensive wizard formation etched on the walls of the pagoda continuously spat out wizard fireballs, chain lightning, thunderstorm, tornado, ice spear forest. As long as the magical energy was not cut off, these spells would be endless. The Tier 2 sorcerers might have been able to withstand this level of bombardment, but the majority of the Tier 1 sorcerers were like herrings in a sea of lava. It didn't take long for half of them to fall. The rest of the sorcerers howled like ghosts and howled like wolves as they cast defensive spells on themselves and continued to attack the force field wall. With the hard work of the group, the energy field wall began to shake and distort, showing signs of crumbling. "Move aside. Let me do it." A sharp roar came from behind. Yurga charged out of the group of magical machines, drenched in blood, the wizard robe he was wearing tattered beyond recognition. Yurga exploded into a large flock of black-feathered, red-eyed crows the moment he reached the energy field wall. He then shot countless death rays at the wall. After a crisp crack, the energy field wall that had exceeded the threshold of the defense finally crumbled. With no obstacles in front of them, the wizards of the Alliance who were eager to escape immediately used their unique techniques to escape from the wizard's pagoda. Some gulped down a bottle of witchcraft potion and disappeared into the lava slabs. Some summoned their beasts and flew away. Some sprinkled some powder on themselves and disappeared. Some strode towards the blazing cavern courageously. The Tier 3 Magus Yurga reassembled his body and turned around. When he saw that at least 2/3 of the Kamara family's magi had successfully escaped, he could finally relax. Thinking about how they had failed miserably in this operation, he was filled with hatred and fury. After failing to exterminate the Crimson family, the Kamara family was the closest to the blazing flame monarch. However, the demonic forest hut and the Undul family had suffered greater losses than the Kamara family. They had abandoned most of their low-level wizards within the wizard's pagoda. Perhaps he could make up for his losses if he attacked these families as soon as possible after returning to his family. After making up his mind, Yurga secretly sent a message to a few level 2 wizards from the Kamara family. While they were escaping, they secretly tailed the remaining level 2 wizards from the 2 families. The magic weapon army was unaware of their little scheme. They were like hunting dogs that had their eyes on their prey, following closely behind the wizards and sending them off with a violent rain of metal bullets. The allied army formed by the 5 wizard families or academies had a total of 106 people when they arrived. However, there were only 34 people who could successfully escape from the flame cave. This meant that a total of 72 wizards had fallen within the blazing flame monarch in the 9 days of attack by the wizard's pagoda. No matter how one looked at it, this was a glorious victory that shocked everyone. Unfortunately, no one knew how much the Crimson family had sacrificed for this victory, and what they had lost. Finally, after half a day, the defense of the wizard's pagoda came to an end. The 34 wizards that had escaped completely disappeared into the boundless dark forest. The magic weapon army stopped after charging out of the flame cave, turning back to clean up the battlefield behind them. Not all of the 72 wizards had died. The Crimson family had captured 26 wizards in one go, all of them level 1 wizards. Among them, there were 7 from the Unveil family, 5 from the demonic forest hut, 8 from the Leighton Academy, 4 from the Senna's family, and 2 from the Kamara family. Without exception, these wizards had all suffered severe injuries, almost losing the ability to resist. The Crimson family locked them up after giving them some simple treatment. As for the level 3 heinous, Wicker had also become one of the captives. In order to kill him, the Crimson family had used up 326 magical machines to completely exhaust his blood energy. After capturing Hines, Mary immediately sent him to the sealing room and sealed him. Whether she could advance to level 3 in the future would depend on this bloodline ancestor. The battle at the Blazing Flame Monarch had shaken the entire scattered forest of towers. At the start of the battle, almost all the wizard families had thought that the Crimson family would not be able to escape this calamity. Who would have thought that the Crimson family had used an astonishing number of metal magical machines to defeat the allied army of the 5 wizard factions, killing and capturing countless wizards. This was an unbelievable battle between wizards. Chapter 788. The shock that the battle at the Crimson Wizard Tower brought to the central continent was getting more and more intense. 5 sorcerer factions had joined forces to annihilate a newly established sorcerer family that had been around for less than 10 years, but they had suffered a crushing defeat. Not only had the mortal army been wiped out, more than half of the 100 official sorcerers had died in battle. Less than 11 of them had managed to escape back to their factions. This was completely out of everyone's expectations, and caused many high-grade sorcerers to turn their attention to this seemingly inconspicuous new family. Possessing all the resources and population of a secondary plane, turning it into their own family's talent reserve base and weapon factory. This was something that every sorcerer family wished to do. However, any sorcerer who had participated in the Dimensional War knew how difficult it was for a sorcerer family to conquer an entire continent with only a handful of sorcerers and suppress the rebellious native. Most sorcerer families had entered the secondary plane in the form of outer world forces or dimensional merchants. This was the only way they could reduce or weaken the natives' wariness and rejection towards sorcerers. Of course, after years of erosion and division, the sorcerers naturally had the means to control the original ruler of the plane, then invade and plunder the resources of the secondary plane indirectly. However, this process usually took a long time. According to the normal process, from invading to completely controlling a small plane, it would usually take 5 to 10 years of hard work and management. If it was a mid-tier plane, this time could be extended to as long as 100 years. However, the Crimson family was completely different. They only used a mere 10 years to completely control 2 secondary planes that were not weak. According to the analysis of some busybodies, one of them should be the magical machine world with green-skinned gnomes as its main population, while the other was the giant dragon plane with pure-blooded dragons as its main population. Logically speaking, with the Crimson family's strength, it should not have been easy to take over these 2 planes. Even if they gave it their all, it was already not easy to set up a stable sorcerer camp in such a plane, not to mention enslaving and controlling the natives who possessed such great power. This was simply an impossible task. Unfortunately, what was shocking was that the Crimson family had managed to do it. Not only did they invade the 2 planes, but they also used some means to completely control the demonic machine world. Otherwise, at the critical moment when the Crimson family was facing extinction, they wouldn't have been able to mobilize thousands of metal puppets from the magic machine world and destroy the allied forces of the 5 sorcerer organizations in one fell swoop. Upon hearing this news, all the Magus families near the blazing flame monarch began to worry. They were very worried that they would wake up to find that their family's secular territory had already been occupied by the enemy, and that their family's wizard pagoda had also been surrounded by these cheap metal puppets. No matter how one looked at it, using one's precious life in exchange for the other party's cheap metal puppets was not worth it. For a time, all the Magus families in the Alobes region could not sit still. They secretly formed alliances and contacted each other countless times. They intended to organize an even larger joint invasion to completely eliminate such a hidden danger. However, after sending spies and ears into the vicinity of the blazing flame monarch to investigate, the Magus families quickly ceased all activities. Goodness gracious, the area around the blazing flame monarch had become a magical machine maze. The entire flame cave, the entire lava hall, were occupied by metal magical machines that wandered about. It would be a fool's dream for outsiders to pass through these two places to investigate the current state of the wizard's pagoda. If they joined forces again without understanding the internal situation of the Crimson family, they would only welcome another wave of magical machines, causing the Magi who participated in the battle to die a tragic death. After the 5 sorcerer organizations defeated by the Crimson family fled back to their respective territories and nests, another internal strife and annexation occurred. The Kamara family, who had basically maintained their family's strength, took the opportunity to invade the demonic forest hut and the Unveil family. The former surrendered in defeat and became a vassal of the Kamara family. The latter lost all of its secular territory and holed up in the last tower of the family, finally preserving the seed of the family. As for the other 2 sorcerer organizations, the Cena's family and the Leighton Wizard Academy, they also retreated to their headquarters after experiencing a series of upheavals and setbacks, barely managing to survive this difficult period. But what about the Level 3 vampire Hennis? After news of Vic's fall and the blazing flame monarch spread, the Vic family's vampire castle in the far southwest of the scattered forest of towers was breached by the combined forces of a few other vampire families. In a short period of time, the members of the Vic family either left their homes and went into hiding, or they turned to other vampire families. Unknowingly, a vampire family that had existed for 300 to 400 years had suddenly vanished into thin air. Unlike the intense turmoil in the outside world, the Crimson family was in a state of jubilation and smiles. But while there were people who wanted to laugh, there were also people who wanted to cry. Gru the brain monster was the one who wanted to cry the most. After the battle, the Crimson family had obtained the greatest benefits and the most spoils of war, but they were the ones who had suffered the greatest losses. In less than a day of counterattack, the magical machine army had lost more than 6,000 people, and the magic batteries had been used up to an astonishing 800,000. Even though the damage to the magical machine army was only a 20th of Gazruvi's magical equipment reserves, the magic batteries had been used up to 2/3. This also meant that without a few years of recuperation, the metal fortress would not be able to erupt with such a powerful wave of soldiers again. After the blazing flame monarch situation had stabilized, Gru the brain monster once again returned to the Lance dimension through the teleportation portal. As for the remaining 2,000 metal magical machines near the wizard's pagoda, they were left to the Gargamel, temporarily acting as the outer sentries of the wizard's pagoda. But without Gru's magical furnace, the blazing flame monarch's wizard's pagoda could not support such a large team of magical machines. They could only recall most of the magical machines back into the wizard's pagoda and hide them as strategic reserves, leaving only a team of 200 magical machines to guard the wizard's pagoda. This was only a temporary measure after the battle. After the situation in the family calmed down, the 200 magical machines would have to be reduced further. Otherwise, they would not even have enough energy to supply the wizard's pagoda, much less repair the damaged wizard's pagoda. As a wizard, they still had to abide by the so-called Wizard's Handbook. Thus, the upper echelons of the Crimson family had a headache dealing with the wizard captive. From the bodies and storage spaces of over 70 dead wizards, the Crimson family had extracted an uncountable number of precious resources and treasures that needed to be appraised. But Mary and the rest had different opinions on how to deal with the 26 wizard captives that were still alive. According to Mary's personality, these wizards would naturally be executed without exception. It would be best if they were all handed over to her, either to become blood slaves or to extract the essence of their blood. Unfortunately, this nonsensical idea was rejected by all of the wizard. No one would care if they did what they did in the foreign world they controlled, but if they were to do so in the wizard world, the old fellows of the Pagoda Forest Association would come knocking on their door at any moment. Due to the unique characteristics of the vampires and a few other strange species, the entire wizard continent strictly forbade them from the embrace and enslaving members of the blood breeds in their own dimension. Otherwise, the few vampire families would not have to go through so much trouble to use natural reproduction methods to expand their ranks. Furthermore, the embrace would exhaust the power of the source of the bloodline. If Mary was really greedy and enslaved these 26 wizards and turned them into vampires, then she would definitely lose a level. Although Mary was greedy, she was not that stupid to lose a level that she had worked so hard to raise just for 26 normal blood breed. Ever since she returned from the Farron Plain, Mary seemed to have realized the disadvantages of casually the embrace and did not dare to easily expand her ranks anymore. Unless she met a particularly outstanding talent, it was better to accumulate as much bloodline power as possible. The Crimson family was originally waiting for the defeated families to send a representative to discuss the matter of redeeming the captives, but they did not come no matter how long they waited. When they sent someone to ask around, out of the 5 wizard families, 3 were crippled and 1 was fat. The demonic forest house had even become a subordinate of the Kamara family. The family could not even protect itself, so where would they find the resources to redeem their wizards? When the Crimson family revealed the news of the outside world to the wizard captives, they all fell silent. The alchemy sorcerers of the demonic forest hut were filled with indignation. If it wasn't for the fact that all of their magic tools had been taken away and their magic powers had been sealed, they would have gone all out with the Kamara family's sorcerers. After waiting bitterly for another 2 months, other than the 2 wizards from the Kamara family who were redeemed by their families at a shocking price, the rest of the wizards became abandoned pawns that no one cared about. Unwilling to let their lives be wasted in the wizard's pagoda's prison, these wizard captives began to come into contact with the Crimson family one after another, discussing the benefits they would receive after joining them. As the defeated, their status naturally could not be compared to normal wizards who came to join them. For a long period of time, they could only accept the enslavement of the wizard contract and become the vassal wizards of the Crimson family. Only after surviving the enslavement period would they have the right to choose again. After a difficult negotiation and confrontation, the 2 sides finally reached a final agreement. The contract period for the wizard captives was set at 20 years. In these 20 years, they would sign a wizard contract with the Crimson family, becoming half-hired and half-enslaved members of the family. Only after the 20 years were up would they have the right to leave or stay as they pleased. After discussing the conditions, the first batch who chose to join the Crimson family were the alchemist wizards with special skills. Their home, the demonic forest house, had already been taken over by the Kamara family. Returning there would only mean living under them, so they might as well settle down in the Crimson family. The addition of this batch of alchemist wizards instantly strengthened the wizard power of the Crimson family. Under the leadership of the Gargamel, a new alchemy division was established. With the alchemist wizards of the demonic forest house as an example, the remaining wizards did not persist for long. They all quietly accepted the wizard contract and became a member of the Crimson family. With the addition of 24 official wizards, the Crimson family's wizards that had been strapped for power became more plentiful. Other than the half-paralyzed Blazing Flame Monarch Wizard's pagoda slowly recovering, even the White Tower far away in the north gained some benefits, and many low-level wizards were sent over. Using these wizards as the foundation, many teaching and combat divisions that could not be supported in the past began to appear. Chapter 789. This was a boundless and terrifying sea of flames. The sky was burning, the earth was burning, and the entire world was burning fiercely. Standing outside the sea of flames and gazing into the distance, one would not be able to sense the terror of these rootless flames. Only by being in it would one understand how much damage an elemental flame with a temperature of 12,000 degrees Celsius could bring to a person. Even low-ranked creatures of fire would not dare to step into this sea of flames, lest their soul and consciousness be destroyed by the flames. However, in the midst of this sea of flames, a calm flame suddenly fluctuated. It absorbed enough fire elemental particles from the surroundings, condensing into a large face that resembled a human. The flames trembled. The large face opened its eyes and suspiciously scanned its surroundings. Then, its pupils began to burn, releasing the light of a soul that was unique to intelligent beings. Damn it, where is this place? Why can't I sense any soul undulations unique to creatures of fire? Did I deviate from my intended route and run into the depths of the sea of flames? After a series of doubts, Grimm could not help but curse angrily. Damn it, damn it, damn it! It's all that hateful flaming tiger's fault. If not for its relentless pursuit, he would not have run into such a place in such a panic. He could not even detect the coordinates of a plane. Beep. Warning, warning. 37 minutes and 28 seconds until soul assimilation. Please find the nearest route to leave the sea of flames, or else your consciousness will dissipate and your soul will be assimilated. Don't just give me a warning, help me determine my position. I need directions. Based on the intensity of the sea of flames, I'll be able to leave it if I head north for 300 kilometers. In the next second, a blue light flashed in the pupils of Grimm's flaming face. The AI chip projected the image of an arrow, indicating a possible direction. I hope I've shaken off that flaming tiger. Grimm sighed for no reason. Immediately after, his soul consciousness quietly shifted to another place, and the huge flaming face silently dissipated. Another quarter of an hour passed, and the flames in the area suddenly parted. A ferocious flaming tiger that was 3 meters long and made up of liquid flames appeared. It strode towards the area leisurely, raising its nose and sniffing a few times. Finally, its gaze landed on the flaming face that Grimm had condensed. You want to play this kind of game with this lord? You're still too inexperienced. This time, you have persisted in the sea of origin flames for almost an hour. At this time, you must be anxious to find the nearest land to escape from the sea of origin flames. If we follow this clue, we won't go wrong. After saying that, Flaming Tiger's gaze swept across the area and locked onto a certain direction. Stepping on the flames of nothingness, he leaped forward. If Grimm was still here, he would have noticed that the other party was heading in the same direction as he was heading. Half an hour later, Grimm successfully emerged from the sea of fire and stood at the edge of a cluster of volcanoes. Looking from afar, a tall volcanic cone pierced the sky at the end of the horizon. Thick black smoke shrouded most of the surrounding area, filling this place with a terrifying scene of doomsday hell. Between the undulating small volcanoes, fire spirits that were more than 3 meters tall were wandering aimlessly. Looking at their posture, it seemed that they had been wandering here for a long time. Grimm's current form was no different from them, an elemental fire spirit that was more than 2 meters tall. However, having just emerged from the sea of origin flames, Grimm's body was still stained with some purple flames. He had to quickly find a place to absorb or extinguish them. Otherwise, even with Grimm's elementary fire immunity, he would not be able to withstand being burned by the flames for a long time. In the past 2 months, Grimm had absorbed 5 flame essences in one go, raising his body's affinity with fire to a certain limit. From now on, if his soul origin didn't evolve, there would be no room for improvement in his fire affinity. After leaving the Gaba Bazaar, Grimm followed the Sea of Origin flames to the north and visited 2 other flame bazaars to collect enough flame essences. After using the 5 flame essences, he still had 2 left. When he returned to the Magus world in the future, he could use them to exchange with other fire magi. He was sure that he would be able to exchange them for many good items. However, that was a matter for later. The most important thing now was to digest the flames in his body. Just as Grimm's elemental fire spirit took a step forward, his body suddenly froze on the spot. Through his 360-degree spiritual perception, Grimm discovered that a strange flame tiger had silently appeared behind him. The flame tiger's mouth, which resembled flowing lava, was now less than 2 fingers away from Grimm's body. The mottled patterns, the majestic and powerful aura, and the concentration of a predator when it hunted its prey, made Grimm's heart jump and his soul leave his body. Grimm was sure that just a second ago, there was nothing behind him, not even a trace of elemental flames. This terrifying Grade 3 flame tiger had appeared out of nowhere, like a predator eyeing its prey. It seemed to be waiting for Grimm to turn around and take the opportunity to bite off his neck. Of course, the elemental fire spirit did not have a neck. Its entire body was a cluster of tall and fierce flames. Only its head and limbs had some human-like features. However, it did not have the delicate body and facial features of a human. Damn it, it's that Grade 3 flame tiger. The moment Grimm realized this, his body was enveloped by a burst of flames. In the next second, his body appeared halfway up a volcano half a mile away. With a loud bang, Grimm's spiritual perception had just shifted from afar. The moment his spiritual feelers extended out of his body, he once again discovered the flame tiger with a strange smile on its face. Although Grimm did not know how the flame tiger smiled, he was sure that it was a smile. Without thinking about what the flame tiger was laughing at, Grimm did not hesitate to activate the second flame leap. If it was before his flame affinity improved, Grimm would not have been able to activate the second flame leap so quickly. Between the 2 flame leaps, it would take at least 3 to 5 seconds for the flame tiger to relocate. Unfortunately, when Grimm stepped out of the flames for the second time, he unquestionably discovered the flame tiger behind him again. From the looks of it, the distance between him and the flame tiger did not change after the 2 flame leap. Grimm sighed inwardly and finally stopped running. Since the flame tiger had used this method to display the huge difference in strength between them, there was no need for him to struggle in vain. Grimm slowly turned his body around. His movement of turning around was gentle and slow, like an old lady in her 80s or 90s. His every move could be seen clearly and clearly. This time, the flame tiger did not move. It was so close to his face that they could hear each other's breath. "Run. Why aren't you running anymore?" The flaming tiger suddenly spoke, and surprisingly, it was using the mental language. "With your flame manipulation skills, I won't be able to get rid of you even if I jump 100 times. Grimm smiled bitterly. It's good that you understand." The flame tiger coldly snorted. "You outsiders think that you control the entire flame world just because you have some superficial knowledge of the flame element. You dare to run around in the fire elemental plane. If you hadn't met me, I'm afraid you wouldn't even know how you died." Grimm could only smile bitterly. He had nothing else to say. However, as a level 2 wizard who was known for his wisdom and knowledge, he was being taught a lesson by a flame magical creature that wizards had always thought was stupid and senseless. The irony of reality filled Grimm's heart with bitterness. "You came from the wizard world?" After teaching Grimm a lesson, the flame tiger leisurely glanced at Grimm's flaming body and asked casually. "Yes." Grim answered without hesitation. You still keep in contact with the wizard world? This time, the flame tiger had an urgent expression on his face. Yes. Then can you return to the wizard world at any time? The flame tiger asked hesitantly. No. Grim shook his head. I came here through the wizard's pagoda. If I want to return to the wizard's pagoda, I have to calculate the anchor point again and look for the wizard's pagoda. The flame tiger shook his head, a look of confusion and impatience on his face. Don't tell me these things I don't understand. Just tell me, do you have a way to bring me back to the wizard's pagoda? Looking at the flame tiger's ferocious expression, it was clear that he was saying, if you can't do it, I'll eat you right now. You want to go to the wizard world? Grim was instantly stunned. What was the wizard world? That was the place where the evilest and most selfish magi of the entire multiverse lived. A level 3 flame tiger might be considered a powerful tiger in the fire elemental plane, and could bully a level 2 fire wizard like Grim, who had, accidentally, entered this place. But if it were to run to the wizard world, it would instantly turn from a predator to a prey, and become the best target for high-level wizards to hunt and hunt. You don't need to know what my goal is. Just tell me if you can do it or not. The flaming tiger moved a little closer. The flames it spewed out from its bloody mouth burned Grim's fire spirit body black and withered. Yes. As long as you are willing, everything will be as you wish. Grim quickly agreed. Only then did the flame tiger move its bloody mouth a little further away. All right then. Sign this contract and we'll set off. In the next second, a mysterious contract formed by pure flames appeared out of thin air, appearing in front of Grim. Grim quickly scanned through the contents of the contract, and his expression instantly turned into a myriad of emotions. Chapter 790. The contents of the contract made Grim speechless. How is this possible? But after thinking about it, he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. After all, most wizards' bodies were similar to some magical beasts when they leveled up. However, wizards were the cornerstone of the wizard world's civilization. They were the only ones who enslaved and contracted magical beasts. There had never been a case of a wizard being contracted by a magical beast. What was this flame tiger trying to do? Just as Grim's eyes gradually became cold and he was about to release the terrifying Balrog in his arms, the flaming tiger seemed to have seen through his actions and sneered. Just now when you said that you would bring me to your wizard tower, you seemed so excited. Hee. Do you think I'm stupid enough to not know that the wizard's pagoda is the most powerful tool of war for you wizards? Once I enter the wizard's pagoda, I'll become a fish on your chopping board. In order to protect myself, there shouldn't be a problem with signing a slave contract, right? Facing such a cunning fox like flaming tiger, Grim could only put away all his intentions of deceiving it, and treat it seriously with sincerity. Intelligent life forms. Any intelligent life form in any region had a mind that was not inferior to a wizard's. Most of the time, they were too lazy or cruel. It was not that their brains were not good, but their instincts drove them to use the most direct and energy-saving method of communication. However, communicating with them was also a rather troublesome matter for the wizards, because of their different survival styles, different races, different ways of thinking, different interests. Many differences led to completely different ways of thinking. When these two individuals sat together to discuss a problem, negotiation was naturally not as good as fist. Unfortunately, Grim would never accept such a magical contract. He would rather die than be humiliated. Even though Grim cherished his life, he had not reached the point where he had no bottom line. Moreover, through his spiritual force perception and the AI chip scan, Grim did not sense any hostility from the flaming tiger. Rather than saying that the magical contract was a guarantee for his life, it would be more accurate to say that the flame tiger was trying to bargain with him. At the very least, under the ferocious pressure of the enemy, The flaming tiger's projection in Grimm's mind was still white. White represented neutrality. Red represented hostility. The deeper the hostility, the more glaring the color would be. Green represented friendliness, and similarly, the darker the color, the friendlier it was. The information gathered by the AI chip indicated that the aura emitted by the flaming tiger was infinitely close to neutral. This also meant that the other party didn't have any malicious intent to kill him. Their ferocious appearances were just a way to force him to submit. In all honesty, the other party probably did not expect an unremarkable human Tier 2 Magus to be able to penetrate the life force field's protection and determine the other party's true intentions by scanning the emotional spectrum. With the help of the AI chip, Grimm became calm and unperturbed, his heart filled with confidence. After 5 hours of bargaining, Grimm and the Flaming Tiger finally reached a mutual agreement. Grimm helped the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger Sindar escape the attention of the Sorcerer World Will and sneak into the Sorcerer World. As for the Rank 3 Flame Tiger, Sindar, he needed to help Grimm kill the Rank 2 Lord of the Flames, Arts. Originally, Grimm had thought that he could intimidate Flaming Tiger by revealing the identity of the Tier 2 Flame Lord, Arts. Unfortunately, when Flaming Tiger heard that Arthas' master was the Tier 5 Flame Monarch Gromes, he only revealed a disdainful sneer. This made Grimm even more confused about Flame Tiger Sindar's background. After spending half an hour chanting the incantation, Grimm and the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger finally completed the magic contract. The golden contract floated in midair, continuously extracting the souls of Grimm and the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger as collateral. Once any party violated the contract, these pledged souls would be annihilated. For this cooperative contract, Grimm had pledged 2/3 of his soul, while the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger Sindar had only paid a fingernail-sized portion. This was actually a sign of the huge difference in strength between the two parties. To be honest, this cooperation contract was more restrictive on Grimm than anything else. If Grimm violated the contract, half of his soul would be destroyed in one go. Even if he was a Rank 2 Magus, he would die instantly from such an injury. As for the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger Sindar, it only paid a small price. With its strength, even if it was punished by the contract, it would only cause a headache. It was far from killing it or turning it into an idiot. There was no helping it. This was the biggest difference between the strong and the weak. A single hair of the Rank 3 Flaming Tiger was thicker than Grimm's waist. For the same contract, Grimm would have to sacrifice almost all of his life to be compared to a single hair from 9 oxen. In terms of strength, no matter how many magic tools he had, it would not change the huge and despair-inducing difference in strength between the two parties. However, after the contract was signed, Grimm was able to avoid the fate of being enslaved by the other party. Although the strength of the two parties was not equal, they were equal individuals in terms of the law of the contract. Grimm made it very clear that the reason he came to the fire elemental plane was to kill Lord Art. Only by completing the mission would he have the chance to return to the Magus world. If Sindar wanted to return to the Magus world as soon as possible, helping Grimm complete the mission was the best choice. In response to Grimm's request, Flaming Tiger Sindar curled its lips and disappeared into the sea of flames without hesitation. Before leaving, it only left a few words. When you want to return to the Magus world, find a random sea of flames and shout my name 3 times. I will find you. Hearing Flaming Tiger Sindar's words, Grimm was shocked. Shouting its name 3 times into the sea of flames, and it would be able to sense it? Why did it sound like the power of law? Could it be with Grimm's identity as a Rank 2 Fire Magus? He could be considered a decent combatant in the Magus world. However, once he stepped out of the plane, he would discover that there were too many unfathomable and incomprehensible mysteries in the higher dimensional planes. It was no wonder that the Magus world set the minimum rank for a Magus to explore the outside world at Rank 5. There was a reason for this. Although magi below rank 5 felt that they were powerful individuals, there were still many uncontrollable risks in the process of exploring the outside world. Hence, Grimm had to be extremely cautious when exploring the outside world. He could not put himself in an awkward situation where his life was at the mercy of fate again. Grimm found a quiet place to deal with the problem of his origin flame. No matter what methods he used, he could not find any traces of the rank 3 flaming tiger. However, he had a feeling that the fellow was not far away and was still spying on him. This was actually a common problem for elemental creatures. The concept of time was extremely lacking in their mind. They would always do things slowly, not caring about the passage of time at all. Hence, Grimm's idea of using time to threaten the rank 3 flaming tiger would not work. The flaming tiger did not care whether it could come to the Magus world tomorrow or the year after. Time in the elemental plane seemed to stand still. All of this was obviously related to the ancient lifespan of elemental creatures. Despite using all sorts of methods, he still could not find any traces of the flaming tiger. Left with no choice, Grimm once again set out on his journey, heading straight for the lair of the rank 2 Flame Lord Arts. Fiery Dust Canyon. This was a barren land filled with fire and dust. On the vast wasteland there was a huge canyon that ran through both ends. It was dark and gloomy, filled with dust and pillars of fire that occasionally shot out from the cracks in the walls. It was almost impossible to see what was going on inside from the outside. There was an ancient city in the depths of Fiery Dust Canyon. There were 1 to 200,000 flaming beasts residing there, all of them intelligent creatures with their own intelligence. Even though the people here were a bit simple and violent, and their intelligence wasn't as cunning and crafty as humans, it was already enough to construct a complete and primitive city of flames. Hence, as soon as he entered the Fiery Dust Canyon, the number of flaming beasts that Grimm encountered increased. After this period of time, Grimm had already mastered the technique of disguising himself as a flaming beast. First of all, the disguised fire spirit could not be too small. Although the strength of high-tier flaming beasts was not measured by their size, among the low-tier flaming beasts, the larger they were, the stronger the flame energy within their bodies. As long as Grimm's fire spirit was large enough, the low-tier flaming beasts would flee at the mere sight of him. They would not dare to disturb or cause trouble. Secondly, the disguised fire spirit could not be too active. The fire elemental plane was actually a very dull and boring place. All the flaming beasts here had a slow and sluggish pace, wandering between different regions almost all year round. Only when they gained sentience in the core of the flame could they break away from the primitive state of chaos and realize the difference between themselves and others. This was reflected in the characteristics and physical characteristics of most flaming beasts. They were unprecedentedly dull and dull. Even those intelligent creatures that had developed their own intelligence were inferior to humans in terms of soul activity and cunning use of their intelligence. Chapter 791. This was a strange city filled with fire creatures. Fire creatures were not good at building and forging, so most of the buildings in the city were dug into the dark red rock walls and connected by winding tunnels. In order to accommodate the large size of the fire creatures, the top of the cave was very high, and the tunnels were wide enough. Just like most human cities, this fire city also had inns, taverns, general stores, secret shops, auction houses, and other similar buildings. However, the ones managing these places were not necessarily fire creatures that grew up in the fire elemental plane. Grimm mixed into the crowd and walked around this city that was less than 3 to 4 miles from north to south. There were only about 20 to 30 shops in total, and he unexpectedly found a material shop run by a Magus. Torque Material. Seeing the name of the shop written in the Magus language outside the cave, Grimm's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but walk in. This was a very simple cave with an area of about 100 to 200 square meters. There were rows of stone slabs on the walls of the shop, and on them were some strange items that were hard to understand. but without exception, they were all soaked in the rich power of fire. A listless little Vulcan was lying on the counter. When it saw a customer, it slowly stood up and looked at Grimm. From its appearance, it seemed to have the strength of a high-level acolyte. Of course, Grimm still had the appearance of a tall Grade 1 Vulcan. His blazing red body slowly dragged a fiery tail behind him as he slowly walked into the shop. The moment the little Vulcan stood up, its nimble, fox-like face revealed a hint of joy. When he saw Grimm's fire spirit form, the excitement and enthusiasm on his face faded, and he returned to his original listless self. "Would you like to buy something or buy something? If you want to sell something, I'm afraid it's not convenient for the shop these days. If you want to buy something, everything in the shop is displayed here. You can choose whatever you want." It seemed to have memorized this set of words a long time ago, and as soon as it opened its mouth, it spouted a lot of words. However, Grimm's attention was not focused on the flame materials it introduced. Instead, he was thinking about the change in the little fire spirit's expression when it saw him. The moment it saw the customer, its face lit up with joy. This was human nature and understandable. But after seeing Grimm's appearance, the joy on its face gradually disappeared. It seemed that it was not happy that a customer had come to visit. There seemed to be something strange going on. Grimm scanned the store and discovered a few unknown items with runes engraved on them. Judging from these signs, it was certain that the store was related to wizards. "Are you the owner?" Grimm's fire spirit asked in a slow and hesitant tone. The language of the fire elemental plane was an ancient native language. The vocabulary was extremely sparse, and the accent was abnormally strange. It would be difficult for non-experienced plane travelers to grasp it. As a Tier 2 wizard, Grimm did not have this problem. Using the spirit assimilation spell, one could easily extract the knowledge related to language from the soul fragments of native creatures. As for the unique accent of the flaming creatures, it could be imitated by modifying the internal structure of the flame incarnation. Therefore, apart from absorbing the flame essence to increase his affinity with fire, Grimm spent most of his time observing and imitating the native creatures. As for Grimm's fire spirit form, he wasn't suspicious at all and shrugged helplessly. "I don't own this store. I'm just a helper hired by a human magus. Our owner has been captured by the Lord. It's been a few months, and he hasn't been released yet." Grimm's heart trembled. He immediately knew what he had done wrong. To be honest, ever since he entered the fire elemental plane, all the flaming creatures he had seen seemed to have intelligence. However, they were still stupid, sluggish, and not agile enough. He had originally thought that the rank 3 flame tiger was a special case, but now it seemed that he had underestimated the Lord of the Flames. The Lord of the Flames had captured the magus who had opened the store, but did not order it to close down. It was obvious that he was trying to catch the fish in the net. Everyone who entered the store would probably be interrogated by the Lord of the Flames' subordinate. Although his disguise was very realistic, if he was caught by the Lord of the Flames and investigated, he would definitely give himself away. At this moment, Grimm's keen senses allowed him to detect 7 or 8 powerful flaming figures rapidly approaching the store. "Does this store have a back door?" Grimm grabbed the little fire spirit and asked urgently. "Yes, it's behind." The little fire spirit quivered in fright. Before its tender little hands could reach the back door, the tall fire spirit had already turned into a streak of flames and flashed past the narrow door, disappearing into the winding stone path. As soon as Grimm's fire spirit disappeared, the shop was filled with heat waves. A large group of ferocious lava giants barged into the shop. "Where's the big guy that just came in? Tell me, where is it? Tell me." A few lava giants that were 5 to 6 meters tall surrounded the little fire spirit that was only 1.5 meters tall, roaring furiously in a deafening voice. The little fire spirit that only had the strength of an advanced acolyte was so scared that it almost fell to the ground. It trembled as it pointed towards the back of the store. The few lava giants immediately flipped over the counter that was in their way and broke through the stone door that was only half the width of their bodies. They quickly chased after the fire spirit. Grim quickly passed through the alleyway behind the store. As he sprinted, his tall fire spirit body quickly changed shape. By the time he arrived at the entrance of the alley and joined the flow of people, his body had already grown from the previous 5 meters to 3 meters. Even the details of his face and appearance had changed slightly. If the Lord of the Flames had followed his previous appearance, he would never have suspected a skinny grade 1 fire spirit like him. Furthermore, fire spirits, flame spirits, and fire elementals were the most common forms of fire creatures in the fire elemental plane. Almost half of the flaming creatures on the street were in humanoid form, just like Grim. At most, there were some differences in some details. However, these differences were hard to detect for creatures that were not natives of this plane. In the past few days, Grim had dissected and scanned many low-ranked fire elementals and fire spirit. With the help of the AI chip's fine control of energy, he was able to replicate the fire spirits he had encountered in detail. Thud. 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 A few lava giants ran out of the alleyway and grabbed the fire spirit that was closest to them. They pulled it in front of their eyes and examined it for a long time. Most fire spirits were violent and wild, and were not restrained by any sort of discipline. The Grade 1 fire spirit was suddenly attacked. Although it knew that it was not a match for the lava giants, it was still enraged. Flames surged around its body, and a stream of high-temperature flames swept towards the lava giants. The lava giant's rough and rigid face revealed a sinister smile. He grabbed the fire spirit and smashed it onto the ground. With just a single strike, the fire spirit's body was smashed into pieces. After more than 10 seconds, the fire spirit condensed its body of flames again, wrapping its core up. Under the orders of Lord Arts, spies from the outer world have infiltrated the Dustfire Canyon. All fire spirits, follow me to the Lord's Hall to verify your identities. If anyone dares to resist, you'll end up like this fellow. The leader of the lava giants stood up straight, stepped on the unlucky fire spirit, and announced loudly in all directions. Upon hearing such an order, the previously peaceful Flame City instantly erupted into an uproar. The fire elementals were all hot-tempered, so how could they tolerate this? They waved their arms angrily at the lava giants. Some of the more hot-tempered ones even began to condense fireballs in their palms, looking as if they would start a fight at the slightest provocation. While the entire street was in chaos, Grim mixed in with the enraged fire spirit. He was the first to throw an elemental fireball at the 6-meter-tall, sturdy Grade 2 lava giant. In the next moment, hundreds of fireballs of various shapes and sizes whistled towards the lava giant. The expressions of the lava giants instantly changed. My goodness, so many fireballs! Although they were not very powerful individually, with so many fireballs stacked together, the resulting explosion was not weak either. Even the lava giants, whose bodies were as solid as steel, did not dare to take it head-on. The lava giants immediately hugged each other and crouched down, using their sturdy backs to protect the weaker parts of their bodies. Bang bang bang, after the earth-shattering sound, a small mushroom cloud slowly rose from where the lava giant was entrenched, followed by a blazing flame shockwave that spread in all directions. At this moment, the entire Flame City could not help but tremble slightly. How dare you! Defying Sir Overlord's order is a rebellion. Come on, bring them back to the prison. With a deafening roar, the lava giants who were responsible for guarding and alerting all over the city rushed out of the fortress and attacked every fire spirit within their sight. Chapter 792. In the fire elemental plane, all fire creatures were free to roam. Unlike the relationship between the lords and their subjects in other material planes, the Tier 2 Lord of the Flames, Arts, only had control over the Dustfire Canyon. He did not have authority over all the fire creatures in the city. Strictly speaking, The only things that truly belonged to Lord Arts in the entire Dustfire Canyon were his lava giant guards and a 300-strong fire elemental legion. The other fire creatures were considered free citizens and were not under Art's command or jurisdiction. Hence, when the Tier 2 lava giant captain angrily wanted to capture all the fire spirits for interrogation, it immediately incited the fury of all the fire creatures and caused them to riot. The fire creatures that could appear in the Dustfire Canyon were not rookies. Most of them were fire spirits, flame spirits, and fire elementals that had evolved. There was no lack of Tier 2 and Tier 3 wanderers among them. When the lava giants began to rush into the City of Fire one after another and capture the fire spirits that roamed freely, they immediately spread chaos to every corner of the city. Grimm also took the opportunity to slip into a corner where no one was paying attention to. He took out a bottle of glistening blue witchcraft potion and gulped it down. A moment later, his body that was shrouded in flames suddenly became transparent. A few moments later, even the last part of his shadow disappeared without a trace. Grimm, who had turned invisible, carefully snuck into the deepest part of the Dustfire Canyon where the Lord of the Flames, Arts, resided. The Lord of the Flames, Arts, resided in that hall. Unlike other places, there was a lava pool that was half a mile wide in the center of the hall. The bottom of the pool of fire led straight to the depths of the earth. A stream of scarlet magma kept bubbling up, stirring up the entire pool of fire. Lord Arts was currently half lying in the lava pool, using a huge lava hand the size of a millstone to splash boiling lava on himself. When the shockingly hot crimson lava flowed wantonly on its rough and solid magma body, the copious flame energy seeped into its core through its rocky skin, making it unable to help but let out a light groan in pleasure. The magma pool below it was not a natural magma pool in the outside world. Instead, it had made use of the special terrain of the Dusty Fire Canyon to block all the exits of the underground fire and guide the high-temperature magma from the underground to this place. That was how the magma pool was formed. For a flame creature like it, only by immersing itself in the pure flame energy day after day and continuously absorbing it into its flame core could its strength grow bit by bit. Due to the monotonous elemental characteristics of the fire elemental plane, other than fire-type materials and rare treasures, there were almost no other materials to advance to the next rank. Therefore, the powerhouses of the fire elemental plane could only accumulate knowledge day after day. They could not travel across the tens of thousands of planes to search for knowledge and resources that suited them. After returning from his lord's place, Arthez stationed himself in the fire hall. He handed over the task of capturing and searching for human wizards to his subordinates while he enjoyed the blissful life of bathing in the high-temperature liquid. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Arthez was not in a hurry. Just like most fire creatures, it had no concept of time. Although its lord had assigned it a mission, there was no time limit for it to complete the mission. Thus, it could still enjoy its comfortable life as a lord while waiting for the mysterious wizard to arrive. However, today, just as he was immersing himself in the magma pool, a violent flame fluctuation suddenly came from the distance of the city. Then, a deafening roar spread through the canyon and into the hall. What's going on? Arthez suddenly stood up from the magma pool. Red, hot, sticky magma flowed down his sturdy magma body. The heat wave and flame flow of nearly 10,000 degrees Celsius instantly swept the entire fire hall. Dong dong dong, with heavy steps, Arthez arrived at the entrance of the fire hall. He stood on top of the stairs and looked down at the fire city in the distance. Flames roared and fireballs flew everywhere. It seemed that chaos was spreading to the whole city. What's going on? Arthez's thunderous voice echoed in the hall. What happened in my territory? Why is there chaos? Where is Huolye? Two lava giants guarding the entrance of the hall knelt on one knee and reported. My lord, Captain Huolye just sent a message. He found a fire spirit spy and is now capturing him. Nonsense. Arthez immediately became angry. Almost 70% of the free people in this city are fire spirit. Does Huoye intend to capture them all? You, go and inform him to give up on the capture immediately. Let my city return to peace immediately. Got it. One of the lava giants replied in a low voice. He turned around and strode towards the city center. After a while, when Artha's order was carried out, the city that had just been in chaos immediately returned to peace. In the entire chaos, apart from the 20 to 30 fire spirits who were caught in the crossfire and beaten up by the lava giants, some buildings in the city center were also affected. They collapsed and a few shops were destroyed. The lava giants would never compensate or apologize. That was why the fire spirits who regained their freedom could only curse angrily and run out of the Dustfire Canyon to find a place to recuperate. Grim, who had turned invisible, noticed the huge figure standing tall at the entrance of the Hall of Flames from afar. Judging from its intimidating aura and the attitude of the fire creatures around it, Grim was 80% sure that it was his target. It was the Grade 2 Lord of the Flames, Arthez. Compared to human lords and kings, Arthez's defenses were crude. If it was a human king, he would have built a castle with high walls on the outside and a large number of guards patrolling the interior. He would also have specially hired experts to protect him. Even so, some kings did not feel at ease and set up many traps around their residences to prevent assassinations and sneak attacks from outsiders. But this obviously would not work in the fire elemental plane. At the end of the day, Arthez was the strongest individual in the entire Dustfire Canyon. That was why he did not need too much useless trash around him. Grim circled around the Hall of Fire a few times in stealth mode, but he only found 2 lava giants standing guard at the entrance. The Hall of Flames was an open space supported by dozens of thick pillars of lava. The spacious space was enough for Grim to enter and exit without any hindrance. Bullpen Cat. Such a pillar of lava might be able to stop the lava giants, but to Grim, who was only 3 meters tall, it was as wide as a flat ground. Grim avoided the 2 lava giant guards and entered the Hall of Flames from another direction. He squinted his eyes and silently sized up the Grade 2 Lord of the Flames, Arthez. This was a lava giant that was 5 meters tall. Its body was completely pieced together by huge pieces of lava rock. Between the cracks of the rocks, dazzling red light that was blinding to the eyes could be seen. A stream of scarlet lava flowed slowly within it. Even if one was 40 to 50 steps away, one could still feel the astonishing heat emitted from its sturdy body. Blue light flickered in Grim's eyes, and he used a strange magic spectrum to draw circles of red heat around his body. Although Arthez did not deliberately increase his strength, the flame energy in his body had already formed a flame domain around him. All creatures that stepped into the domain would have to bear fire damage of up to 68 degrees. Strictly speaking, the flame domain that Grim had activated was actually the prototype of a flame domain. The Magi must have obtained inspiration and knowledge from the flame creatures, and used magic to simulate a weaker version of the flame halo. As he was worried that the flame energy in his body would be detected by Arthez, Grim did not dare to get too close. He could only silently analyze and collect data on Arthez's strength from afar. Based on the intensity of Arthez's flames and the aura he emitted, the AI chip quickly projected Arthez's stats into Grim's mind. Arthez, Rank 2 Lava Giant, Flame Lord of Fiery Dust Canyon, Basic Stats. Strength 27, Vitality 24, Agility 7, Spirit 13. Seeing that both Arthez's strength and vitality had broken through 20 points, Grim's brows furrowed, and he began to worry. From this, it could be seen that this Rank 2 Flame Lord had taken the path of a berserk attack. His strength and vitality had actually reached such a high level. With its 24 points of vitality, even if it did not block Grim's 2 to 3 Rank 2 spells, it would not suffer any serious injuries. With its 27 points of strength, it could probably shatter Grim's lava shield with a single punch and punch a hole in his chest. Moreover, there were 2 peak Grade 1 lava giant guards outside the flame hall. If Grimm chose to ambush Arthez, he would not be able to kill him within a few seconds. Then, the guards would rush over to deal with him. At that time, Grimm would not be able to deal with such a powerful opponent while simultaneously dealing with the lava giant guard. Grimm hesitated for a moment, then slipped out of the flame hall silently. Of course, before he left, he secretly left an eye of witchcraft in a corner of the hall. Only then did he run into Fiery Dust Canyon and find a place to hide. Chapter 793. In the following days, Grimm began his life as a peeping Tom. Unfortunately, Lord Arts was like a typical otaku, spending all his time in the lava pool. He had never been seen patrolling his territory or meeting with his subjects. Even when the captain of the guards came to report to him, he would just sit cross-legged in the lava pool and send them away with a few words. From this, it could be seen that the Lords of the Flame in the Fire Elemental Plane did not have a strong desire for power. Instead, they focused all their attention on absorbing fire energy and increasing their strength. The way they increased their strength was also primitive and crude. It was a shame for the resources and convenience they had. Under the surveillance of the witchcraft eye that Grimm had secretly planted, Lord Arts no longer had any secrets or privacy to speak of. Day and night, Grimm constantly thought about how he could assassinate Art. A direct attack would definitely not work. Arts was a powerful Grade 2 Lord of the Flames. Even if he challenged him openly, Grimm would only have a 40% chance of winning if he used all his trump cards. With the help of the Grade 1 lava giant guards, Grimm's chances of winning would drop to 10%. If he was unlucky and the Grade 2 lava giant captain was still by Art's side, Grimm would not even have a 10% chance of winning. Hence, from the start, Grimm had decided on a sneak attack to kill Arts. Before he took action, Grimm had to think of a way to weaken Art's basic strength. Otherwise, if Arts could hold out for 7 or 8 minutes, all the lava giants in the Fire City would come to attack Grimm. Fortunately, Grimm had considered that he would need to assassinate a Lord of the Flames and bought a batch of ice essence from the Magus Market at a high price. This was a strange ice essence that came from the parotid glands of the snow worm, an ice-type magical creature. It was a rare material. If a magus who practiced ice-type magic used it as a potion, it would undoubtedly greatly increase their strength. However, if a fire shaman accidentally ingested it, there would be a terrifying consequence of it contaminating the source of fire. Of course, with Art's strength, it would be difficult for Grimm to trick him into swallowing the ice essence, so Grimm had to find another way to achieve this indirectly. On this day, Grimm once again snuck out of his hiding place and snuck into Flame City. After a few days of scouting and scouting, Grimm had a clear grasp of the terrain of the Flame City. He was even more familiar with the key nodes of the city. He planted hundreds of alchemy bombs on most of the supporting pillars of Flame City. When the time came, Grimm detonated all the bombs without hesitation. The Flame City that had been quiet for less than 40 days had once again descended into chaos and madness. The pillars that supported the walls above were blown apart. The rubble and the collapsed walls above the Dustfire Canyon tumbled down, burying almost 1/5 of the city in the falling rocks. The deafening roar and the earth-shattering power immediately drew Arts, who was resting with his eyes closed, out of the Hall of Flames. While Arts was roaring outside the hall, Grimm snuck in again and dived into the lava pool. After entering, the first thing Grimm did was set up a strange flame spell formation at the bottom of the pool. This flame spell formation was divided into 3 layers, each with 3 different effects. The first effect was to absorb the fire energy in the lava pool and provide it to Grimm to replenish his energy in battle. The second effect was a flame cage. Using the energy in the lava pool as a material, he could construct a fire cage that isolated the outside from the outside. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about being disturbed by the outside world. The third effect was an invisibility barrier. It could hide Grimm's soul aura and prevent Arts from detecting him beforehand. After setting up the spell formation, Grim placed a small witchcraft trap at Art's favorite place and hid the sealed ice marrow within it. After everything was settled, Grim dispersed his real body and dispersed himself into a dense ball of fire, quietly hiding at the bottom of the magma pool. With the concealment of the invisibility barrier, as long as Arts did not scan the area, he would not be able to discover Grim's existence. After all, the Lord of the Flames, Arts, was only proficient in physical combat and only had 13 points of spiritual force. If Grim transformed into a flame demon twice, his spiritual force would reach 29 points. With such strength and the terrifying flame demon, he would be able to go all out against Arts. Time always passed very slowly while they waited. His territory had been blasted to smithereens by an enemy, but his useless subordinates could not even find the shadow of the enemy. If such a thing happened to anyone, it would be enough for it to fly into a rage out of humiliation. After knocking down 3 lava giants in one go, Arthes vented a little of the anger in his chest. He ordered his only Grade 2 clansman, Huolai, to lead a small team of lava giants to search the entire city. At the same time, he ordered the Fire Elemental Army to rush to the entrance of the Dustfire Canyon and seal it off. Before they found the troublemaker, no living beings were allowed to step out of the Dustfire Canyon. This time, the Lord of the Flames, Arts, was resolutely carried out. A large number of formed fire elementals occupied the entrance and set up a perimeter. The lava giants loudly repeated their lord's orders as they gathered all the fire creatures into a specialized cave for further investigation. Arts also brought over 2 more lava giants to stand guard outside the Hall of Flames. This way, he now had a total of 4 Grade 1 lava giant guards. For the lava giant tribe, which only had 27 members in total, this was an unprecedented and strict measure. After angrily berating his subordinates, Arts swayed his heavy and stocky body once again to the lava pool. Without hesitation, he jumped in with a plop. The bottom of the pool was sloping downwards. The edge of the pool was only 3 meters deep, while the center was 7 to 8 meters deep. Arts stood at the edge, but half of his body was still exposed. Since his mind was disturbed, Arthes did not pay any attention to what was happening in the pool of fire. He slowly pushed away the pillar of gold and jade, half leaning and half lying on the edge of the pool of fire, only exposing his huge head that was 1 square meter above the magma. In order to wait for the results of his clansman's search, Arts did not choose to rest. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes and silently absorbed the fire energy that was seeping out of the boiling lava. Just as he was lost in thought, Grim, who was hiding at the bottom of the pool, slowly gathered his body and opened his eyes. As a Grade 2 fire wizard, Grim's body contained a shocking amount of fire energy. It was impossible for him to face Arts without him noticing. Hence, Grim had dispersed his energy beforehand, using the lava's fire energy to conceal his presence. Now that he was about to make his move, Grim began to gather his body and increase his strength. First transformation, Body of Flames. Second transformation, Body of the Flame Demon. As the 2 tall flame demons rose from the ground, the flame energy in the lava pool was completely stirred up. An incomparably tyrannical spiritual consciousness rapidly pressed towards Lord Art. Ugh! What's going on? Arts, who was resting, opened his eyes abruptly and looked at the sticky bottom of the pool in shock. There, a wave of tyrannical flame energy suddenly condensed and took form. Then, like a small mountain, it crushed towards him with an overwhelming force. Enemy! The enemy is at the bottom of the lava pool. Artesian instantly understood what was going on. He roared angrily and prepared to stand up. Unfortunately, Grim had already activated his mental consciousness. The first thing that attacked Arts was the magic trap Grim had set up on the pool's walls. A flame rune suddenly appeared and shattered, and a fist-sized ball of light emitting a hazy red glow slammed into Art's thick leg. In the next moment, the red glow dissipated, and an icy aura that terrified Arts spread from the point of impact. In the blink of an eye, Arts and the lava pool within a dozen meters of him were frozen in a layer of blue ice crystals. A strange layer of frost spread along Arts's body, spreading to his chest, head, and arms. If this layer of frost were to spread to its core of flames and soul, it would most likely be impossible for it to advance any further. Fire subdued ice, and ice subdued fire. These two attributes mutually reinforced and countered each other. There was no real difference between the two attributes. The only difference was the number of attributes they could control. With Arthes' strength and the lava pool's boundless flame power, the ice crystal marrow's power of ice would be completely exhausted in less than a quarter of an hour. However, before the power of frost was completely consumed, the power of frost that suddenly erupted from Artesian's body still had the upper hand. It eroded Artesian to the point where he howled and cursed. Just as Arts was trying his best to gather the flame energy in his body to resist the invasion of the ice essence, the lava in the lava pool splashed in all directions. Two tall flame demons rose from the ground and launched their most ferocious attacks at Art. At the edge of the lava pool, the scarlet lava was restrained and twisted by a strange force. It rose from the ground and formed dozens of lava pillars that were more than a meter thick, sealing off the entire pool. The four lava giant guards who heard the commotion saw the Lord of the Flames being besieged through the gaps in the lava pillars. They anxiously rammed and smashed the lava pillars with all their might. Unfortunately, with the endless energy from the lava pool, the pillars were repaired in the blink of an eye. Chapter 794. The flame cage had temporarily stopped the lava guards from entering the battlefield, but it did not give Grimm enough time to deal with them. Against a 6-meter-tall Lord of the Flames that was forged from lava rocks that were as hard as steel, any spells below Grade 2 would only be able to restrict its movements. They would not be able to harm its body in the slightest. Moreover, a Tier 2 spell required a considerable amount of time to cast. Unless the other party was a fool, they would definitely not allow Grimm to cast a spell beside them. However, Grimm's magic traps still managed to trap the Lord of the Flames for 5 fingers. This short period of time was enough for Grimm and the Balrog to cast a large lava fireball. Arts, who had just expelled the frost energy from his body, was instantly smashed into the ground by the lava fireball. A deep crater, 1 meter in diameter, appeared in the middle of his chest. The crater was densely covered with spiderweb-like cracks. That was how violent a battle between flames was. Both sides were immune to or neutralized by their opponent's flames. If they wanted to deal any real damage to their opponent, they could only rely on their fiery fists or physical attacks that came with spells. When the enraged Arts crawled out of the pool of lava, the Balrog swung its lava-beheading sword and charged forward. Grimm, on the other hand, was still chanting a mysterious incantation. The Balrog, which mainly used elemental energy, was no match for the violent Arts in close combat. However, it still had to charge forward and buy time for Grimm to cast his spells. Grimm was desperately absorbing the fire energy from the mysterious spell formation under his feet. Using his flame-shaping ability, he condensed the fire elemental energy between his hands into extremely sharp flame spears. He then threw them at Arts, who was in the middle of a fierce battle. Although Grimm's 18 strength after 2 transformations could not compare to a big guy like Arts, it was more than enough to break through Arts' defenses. Sharp dark red flame spears turned into flame arrows and pierced into the gaps of Arts' magma body. Then, after a series of earth-shattering explosions, they exploded into fireballs one after another. Arts might be immune to this degree of fire damage, but he was not immune to the piercing damage of the flame spear and the shockwave of the flame burst. The lava armor covering Arteus' body broke and peeled off layer by layer, revealing his true form. Artesian liked to soak in the lava. On the one hand, he wanted to absorb the pure flame energy in the lava. On the other hand, he wanted to absorb the lava stones to increase the thickness of his body. It was killing two birds with one stone. No wonder it could persist for so many years without feeling bored. In a battle between fire creatures, an indestructible shell was a great advantage. Grim had a deep understanding of what it felt like to fight two fiery monsters that were 5 to 6 meters tall in front of him. As the earth shook and the mountains shook, the entire lava pool suffered a terrifying disaster. Large amounts of lava splashed in all directions, and even the flame hall began to shake violently. Judging from the situation, it was as if the Flame Lord Artaeist was suppressing the terrifying Balrog and giving it a good beating. The heavy lava fists that were the size of millstones pounded on the terrifying Balrog's head, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Even the head was slightly deformed. If not for the mysterious spell formation at the bottom of the fire pool providing the terrifying Balrog with fire energy, it would have been more than enough for the Balrog to explode in just a minute or two. But even after being beaten up so badly, every time Flame Lord Arts struggled to get up and pounced on Grim, the terrifying flame demon would roar and fight with him again. Under Grim's incessant flame spear attacks, the Flame Lord Artaeist could not fully focus on dealing with the terrifying Balrog. Even with Artesian's wild strength and powerful body, he could not withstand the combined attacks of two opponents of the same level. As he fought, Artesis roared loudly. In the center of the flame city in the distance, deep roars rose and fell one after another. Tall and mighty lava giants rushed out of the buildings, knocking down the low-tier fire elementals blocking their way and madly sprinting towards the flame hall. Among them, a particularly tall and majestic lava giant was especially eye-catching. Looking at its size and the way it ran like a shooting star, it was the Grade 2 guard captain Holai. Grim, who was fighting in the lava pool, watched the scene through the witchcraft eye he had left behind. His face, which was hidden under the blazing flames, turned pale. He only had 3 minutes left. If Sure Fong tried to kill a powerful Tier 2 Flame Lord, he would have no chance of success if he cherished his body too much. If time dragged on, Artaeus' subordinates would arrive, and the flame cage outside wouldn't last long. At this moment, Grim had also given up on long-range guerrilla tactic. He raised his head and let out a roar. A lava greatsword made of lava and flames materialized between his hands. He pounced forward frantically and cooperated with the terrifying Balrog and Arts to unleash a barrage of punches and kicks. When faced with a rank 2 Lord of the Flames, a long-range fire spell's power and resistance were greatly reduced. A rank 2 spell was far from comparable to a blazing rock fist that was filled with all his strength. It was much more direct and powerful. Just a moment ago, there were only 2 flame monsters fighting, but now there were 3. In terms of strength, Grim was no match for Artaeus. Grim had 18 strength after transforming, while Artaeus had 27 strength. With just a little more, Arthes would have a crushing advantage when facing Grim. With a difference of 5 points in strength, every time their fists collided, Grim would be knocked back. His body would stagger and he could not stand firmly. If there was a difference of 10 points in strength, Grim's blazing fist would be shattered by Artaeus' lava fist. At that time, the scene would be even more terrifying and ugly. Lower your head. Dodge 2 meters to the left. Greatsword slash. Attack position marked. Grim didn't have any talent in combat, so he relied on the A.I. Chip's combat instructions to fight. Grim lowered his head to dodge Artaeus' ferocious blazing fist, then quickly dodged 2 meters to the left, dodging a silent knee strike from below. Grim took advantage of the momentum and swung his lava greatsword upwards, heavily slashing through the crack in Artaeus' chest. The sharp edge of the big sword with jagged teeth and the rough and hard magma body of Arthes brushed against each other, causing dazzling sparks and a large amount of red magma to splash out. This was not real lava, but the blood that flowed within the Lord of the Flames, Artaeus. With the help of the A.I. chip's powerful battle support system, Grimm's field of vision was filled with colorful transparent spectral lines and red lines that appeared and disappeared one after another. The red lines stuck to Arteus' tall and majestic body, directly marking the gaps in his defense and the weak points on the surface of his body. Moreover, as Arts moved and changed his posture, the red lines were also constantly shifting, appearing and disappearing. Just a moment ago there was a dark red line on his chest, but when he moved to a position where he could attack, the dark red line would disappear along with his posture. The red lines flickered, appearing and disappearing at different spots on Arteus' body. Attacking these spots would cause the greatest amount of damage with the least amount of force. According to the saying on Earth in his previous life, this should be called fatal strike. However, the red line's positions were constantly changing, and with Grimm's combat strength, he couldn't even catch 1/5 of them. However, this 1/5 of fatal strike was enough to cause Arteus to bleed profusely in this life and death battle. As for Grimm, the lava greatsword in his hand was broken, his head was smashed in half, and a small part of his chest was caved in. As for the main attacker, the Balrog had been beaten to a pulp. It was a pitiful sight. As Tier 2 creatures, their battle shouldn't have been so ugly and ugly. A normal battle between Tier 2 creatures would always start with long-range attacks, constantly moving and dodging, trying to find the opponent's flaws and loopholes. Only when magic power couldn't effectively harm the other party would they try to engage in some close combat. How could they be like Grimm, who fought to the death right from the start and entered a cruel death match? There was only one chance. If he missed this chance to kill Arteus, he would not give him a second chance. Therefore, Grimm didn't hesitate to go all out in this ambush after putting all his wealth into it. Since the start of the battle, Grimm had already used the AI chip's help to create 7 to 8 large bloody holes on Arteus' body. Grimm's body had also been smashed into pieces by Arteus' heavy lava fist. However, this damage was obviously not enough to kill the Lord of the Flames with a vitality of 24. At this moment, the lava giant's reinforcements had already reached the entrance of the flame hall. They would only need a few more steps to reach the flame cage. There wasn't much time left for Grimm. Fight! Grimm roared, and with a flame leap, he appeared in front of Arteus. The berserk fire energy in his body gathered in his hands, forming a new lava greatsword. He viciously stabbed at the hole in Arteus' chest. The Lord of the Flames, Arteus, reacted quickly. He opened his left hand and grabbed the tip of the lava greatsword. No matter how hot the lava splashed on his body, he did not let go. He also took the opportunity to raise his right fist and viciously hammered at Grimm's broken and twisted head. The heavy flame fist brought with it a whistling wind. Before the fist even arrived, the strong wind pressure had already caused Grimm's flame barrier to crack. Chapter 795. The fiery fists whistled through the air. But halfway through, he was intercepted by a pair of flaming hands that appeared out of thin air. The terrible Balrog was already battered beyond recognition, but it still managed to cling onto Arthe's heavy right arm. 3 huge fiery men with a height of 5 to 6 meters were hugging each other, rolling and fighting crazily in the lava pool. Taking advantage of the brief moment when Arthe's arms were entangled, Grimm crouched on top of the Flame Lord's body, his 2 flaming hands stabbing at the massive pit in Arthe's chest. As he continued to stab, the broken stone powder in the pit kept falling, and the cracks that looked like spider webs quickly spread to the surroundings. As if sensing the danger of death, Arthes began to struggle even more violently, his powerful arms punching at the terrible Balrog. The Balrog's elemental body finally couldn't withstand the continuous attacks and collapsed. That sparkling and resplendent demon puppet crystal nucleus tumbled into the magma, and with a gurgling sound, disappeared without a trace. This was the 3rd time an enemy had destroyed the terrible Balrog's body during its summoning. As Grimm's enemies grew stronger, even the Tier 2 terrible Balrog struggled to hold out until the demon puppet core ran out of energy. Moreover, summoning Tier 2 demon puppets consumed a lot of concentration, making it difficult for Grimm to summon a large group of demon puppets to attack his enemies. After the terrible Balrog retreated, only Grimm and Arthez remained in the lava pool. Flame Lord Arthez's heavy lava fists slammed into Grimm's body. Grimm's flame shield and lava shield did not even last for a second before they exploded into pieces. Arthez's heavy fists made Grimm's head spin, and his vision was blurred by the explosion. His Balrog's body crumbled, and he could no longer stabilize his body. Grimm, who had already forgotten himself, ignored the lava fists that rained down on him and continued to stab at Art's chest with all his might. The cracks were growing larger and larger with Arthez's strength. He could easily send Grimm flying with a single punch. However, in order to prevent such a situation from happening, Grimm turned his left hand into a flaming whip and wrapped it around his opponent's waist. Just like that, even though his body was being battered by the lava fists and was on the verge of collapse, his right hand was still desperately attacking Arthez's chest. Both sides rolled around in the lava pool, punching and stabbing each other. The earth-shaking battle almost razed this place to the ground. Meanwhile, the Tier 2 lava giant, Huolai, had charged into the flame hall and was attacking the flame cage with all his might. As expected of a Type 2 monster, its strength far surpassed that of its 4 Type 1 brethren, and the destructive power it brought was incomparable to the combined might of the 4 brethren. The flame cage was being destroyed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, at this moment when everyone's fighting spirit soared, a crisp crack suddenly came from the huge depression in the chest of Arts, the Lord of the Flames, which was caused by the huge lava fireball. Its half-meter-thick magma shell was finally penetrated by Grimm. The flaming hand pierced into Arts's chest and grabbed hold of the flame core that was as big as a human head. As the violent and destructive power of the flame energy surged into Arts's body, a series of flame explosions erupted from Arts's body. Grimm's flame energy seized the opportunity and successfully imprisoned Arts's soul. There was a soft pop. Grimm pulled out his right hand, and Arts's flame core turned from scarlet to dark red in his palm, before condensing into a gray stone core. The surroundings suddenly became deathly silent. That was why the lava giant stopped attacking the flame cage and stared at the stone heart in Grimm's hand with a horrified expression. He had almost lost the will to think and fight. The Lord was dead. All the lava giants stared at the scene in front of them in a daze, this short sentence lingering in their minds. Finally, Huolai came back to his senses. His eyes that had calmed down once again became bloodshot. He pointed at Grimm and roared, "Kill him!" The other lava giants seemed to wake up from a dream and roared in unison, "Kill him! Avenge the Lord!" In the next moment, the flame cage collapsed under the lava giant's stone fists, revealing the devastated fire pool battlefield. Grimm quickly put away the stone heart with Artez's soul sealed inside and quickly retreated from the second transformation. When he turned from a 5-meter-tall Balrog back to a 2-meter-tall human wizard, the surrounding lava giants had already rushed towards him. Grimm was now an arrow at the end of its flight. Although the battle with Flame Lord Arts was short, it was extremely intense. He had almost used up all the flame energy in his body. At this moment, there were at least 20 lava giants surrounding him. Among them, there was even the guard Captain Huolai, whose strength was not inferior to his in the slightest. Since he had completed his mission, there was no point in continuing to fight. Grimm dived into the bottom of the pool of fire without hesitation and picked up the magic puppet crystal core. He then went to the crack that led to the underground and dove in like a fish. Behind him, the enraged roars of the fire giant could be heard. Grimm didn't care about it at all. While resisting the lava, he quickly moved away. A quarter of an hour later, Grimm finally crawled out of a crack in the ground with difficulty. He was already 3 miles away from the fiery dust canyon, and he could only vaguely see the dust and flames at the entrance of the canyon. Mission completed. I've finally completed my mission. With a sudden sense of relaxation, Grimm's eyes were a little moist. Throughout this journey, he had never doubted his own abilities, nor had he doubted his luck. It seemed that fate was still on his side. Otherwise, entering a high-grade plane to assassinate a powerful elemental lord whose strength was on par with his own would have been a joke. Just as Grimm was feeling sorrowful and excited about his magnificent feat, a strange voice sounded beside him. "You human magi do have some tricks up your sleeves. To think that you could kill a powerful lord with such a weak body. Hee, looks like I've underestimated you." Grimm was startled by the sudden sound. When he turned around, he discovered that the flaming tiger was lazily crawling behind him, staring at him with a pair of bright eyes. Lord Sindar, weren't you supposed to be waiting for me near the waymark of the wizard's pagoda?" I didn't have anything to do anyway, so I followed you to see how you killed Art. Not bad, the plan was perfect, and you fought hard enough. Seems interesting. That would be interesting. Grimm could not help but tear up. It was not just interesting, it was very interesting. In the battle just now, if his luck and strength had been slightly worse, he might have ended up dying in another world. But in the eyes of Lord Sindar, this kind of life and death battle was only a little interesting. The level 3 flame tiger's gaze did not change, as if it was not affected by Grimm's self-mockery. "My mission here is over. In that case, I welcome Sir Sindar to visit my private wizard's pagoda for the rest of the journey." Shaking his head to get rid of those boring thoughts, Grimm forced a smile and respectfully invited the flame tiger out of courtesy. "Then let's go." Towards this topic, Flame Tiger Sindar was very interested. He stood up and left. Grimm had no choice but to follow them. Lance Dimension, Metal Fortress. An irritable giant dragon was pacing back and forth in the metal hall. Finally, unable to hold back his irritation, Arms stopped his meaningless stroll and roared angrily at the empty hall. "It's been 11 days. I've been here for 11 days. Why hasn't your human master appeared yet? No, I have to see him immediately. A moment later, Gazruvi's strange voice rang out in the metal hall. "Lord Arms, forgive me for not being able to help you in this matter. As far as I know, Lord Grimm is currently traveling in another world, and it will be difficult for him to return in a short time. Even if I have a way to pass on your message, he will not give up on his mission and return for such a small matter. So, small matter. Arms seemed to be completely infuriated by the word, and his voice immediately rose an octave. "My woman is about to be stolen by someone else, and you still dare to say that it's a small matter? Do you believe me when I say that I can turn this place into a sea of fire with my dragon flames?" At the end of his sentence, Arms was basically making a blatant threat. "There's no other way, Lord Arms. From your description, I can tell that this matter involves a terrifying level 4 giant dragon. This kind of person has already exceeded the level of matters that I can handle. So no matter how anxious you are, you have to wait for Lord Grimm to return before making a decision." After roaring for a while, Arms, who had vented some of his emotions, once again began to stroll around the metal hall. Wait. What else could he do other than wait? Whenever he thought about his beautiful and alluring dragon lady lying in the arms of another giant dragon, Arms felt as if his heart was being boiled in oil, and he could not sit still. Chapter 796. Goblin Plain, Mechanical Mech City. As the center of magical machinery technology in the entire Goblin Plain, Mechanical Mech City had become the dream city of all goblin engineers and technicians. This was originally the private territory of the Goblin Empire's Princess Vanessa. However, ever since the foreign wizards came to this world, it became the place where the wizards set up their laboratories. A Magus Tower rose from the ground, becoming the most eye-catching landmark here. Originally, due to the fear of the evil wizards, no goblin civilians or freelancers were willing to provide services to these people who had taken away their control of the plane. However, as time passed, The older generation of goblins who were fearful of the wizard's brutality and evilness gradually died of old age. Although the new generation of goblins still didn't like sorcerers, the memories of the sorcerer's brutality in their minds were blurred and ambiguous. Correspondingly, there were always those who were willing to cater to the changes in the world. They excitedly ran to the wizard tower to seek refuge with the wizards, and became the wizard's minions and representatives stationed in various places. They quickly turned from ordinary goblins into magical machinery warriors that everyone respected. They had the power to crush ordinary goblin mechanical warriors. Moreover, during the period when the beautiful and gentle wizard Meryl ruled the goblin plane, her gentle and friendly attitude had greatly reduced the hostility of the goblin nobles. Especially the endless supply of health potions, beauty potions, charm brooches, instant magic wands, witchcraft scrolls, elemental amulets from the sorcerer's world. These were the super luxuries that the goblin nobles flocked to. They were irresistible to the goblins whose lifespan was less than 20 to 30 years. Moreover, the goblin great sage Cabby constantly called on his believers not to use violent means to resist the wizard's rule. Instead, they should conditionally start a dialogue and trade with the wizards. This argument was undoubtedly in line with the thoughts of the goblin nobles. Hence, some large merchant groups and tycoons took the initiative to join the team of collaborators. The existence of a magus and the identity of a ruler were gradually accepted by all the goblins under the guidance and teachings of the Magi day in and day out. As the most charismatic ruler, Meryl wielded unparalleled influence in the goblin plane. Under her call and actions, a huge mechanical city rose from the periphery of the wizard station, and the wizard tower was surrounded and protected in the center of the city. The new city was a typical city of steel, and also a city of magic machinery. Here, there were no wooden or stone buildings at all. Towering metal fortresses made of high-strength alloy stood everywhere. In the city, there were no longer carriages or beasts of burden. Instead, there were goblin chariots or mechanical chocobos emitting thick steam. Those who could settle down in Floating Mech City were all professionals with special abilities in metal forging or magical machinery manufacturing. They belonged to more than a dozen goblin merchant groups or conglomerates of different sizes, and their main business was to trade resources and materials across dimensions. When Meryl was in charge of Floating Mech City, she set strict trade rules. Even wizards who wanted to obtain resources from the goblin plane had to take out magic crystals or witchcraft items of equivalent value in exchange. Of course, the prices of all trades were set by the Scarlet Sorcerer and the goblin nobles after discussion. Meryl's brilliant move was to take in Princess Vanessa, who was loved by all the goblins, as her disciple. She then announced that she would be the permanent ruler of Floating Mech City, and would not be affected by the change of the resident sorcerers. This greatly won over the hearts of the moderate goblins. After Meryl, the second to reside in the goblin plane was her disciple, the Wind Witch Desira. Since they were of the same lineage, Desira naturally would not change the ruling style that her teacher had created. Hence, in the 10 to 20 years that the Scarlet Sorcerer had ruled over the goblin plane, the goblins had also changed the ruling structure that used to be centered around the goblin royal family, and gradually shifted the control of the plane to this flourishing Floating Mech City. It was currently afternoon, and the warm sunlight shone down from the sky, illuminating the metallic Floating Mech City with a golden glow. Princess Vanessa stood quietly on the balcony of the 7th floor of the tower, quietly looking down at the rows of metal buildings and the pedestrians walking to and fro on the spacious street. As the red mechanical eyes in her exquisite eye sockets adjusted slightly, she could even see the faces and expressions of the people on the streets from 3 to 4 miles away. There was no misery on their faces after being ruled by the evil sorcerers. Instead, everyone was busy, as if they were working hard for a beautiful and blissful future. Could the people who were enslaved and ruled by the other races also have bliss? Vanessa tilted her exquisite head, her little brain filled with mechanical gears and magical energy filled with incomprehensible confusion and bewilderment. Ever since she had died unexpectedly in the Steel Capital, her soul had been preserved by the sorcerers. After that, in order to rope in Tickhole and the Goblin royal family, the sorcerers used some evil methods to implant her soul into a completely metallic body. And she had used this method to achieve the eternal life that most goblin nobles dreamed of. Once upon a time, Princess Vanessa, who loved her people and wanted to lead the goblins to prosperity, was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. She had wanted to end her boring eternal life countless times. Unfortunately, the strange metallic body made her an almost immortal monster. She could not cut through a knife, arrows could not pierce through, starve to death. Other than absorbing some magical energy, she did not need to eat at all, suffocate to death. Ever since she had been reborn, she had not breathed at all, jump off a building. Her body that was made of super alloy was quickly destroyed. Even if it was really broken, the sorcerers would just give her a new body and revive her, after going through a period of painful and dark torment. With the encouragement of Tickhole and her many supporters, Princess Vanessa finally accepted her new body and started a brand new life. She lived in the Sorcerer Tower and learned new knowledge from the sorcerer world every day. She understood the strange dimensional worlds outside. For the first time, Vanessa was enlightened. Although she loved her people and this world in the past, she was undoubtedly a frog at the bottom of a well. She closed herself off, numbed herself, and used the so-called love to trap her people in a narrow and isolated world. A world like theirs would be found by the other races sooner or later. There was no such thing as friendship and harmony between the dimensional world. There were only blatant benefits and unrestrained violence. In comparison, the sorcerers who invaded the Goblin Plane were willing to use a gentle method to rule them. This was actually the greatest blessing for the goblins. For some reason, after being broadened by the vast and novel knowledge of the other world, Vanessa was crazily infatuated with the combination of machinery and magic energy. With her encouragement and push, a large number of young goblins were selected to become the students of the newly established Magic Machinery Academy. There was also a large number of goblin engineers who changed their professions to research on magic machinery. Just as she was quietly looking down at this strange city that represented the combination of goblins and sorcerers, two goblin maids came behind her and bowed. "Princess, Sir Schroeder wishes to see you." Schroeder was the finance minister of the Mechanical Machinery Academy. He came to see her to either ask for a magic crystal grant or to apply for a research on magic energy. At the end of the day, it still depended on the source of magic energy. Most of the goblins were magic insulators, and could not sense the existence of elemental particles. Hence, if they wanted to research magic energy, they could only rely on the magic energy produced by decomposing magic crystals to conduct in-depth research. As for the Kalos alloy, which could be used to create a spatial furnace, it was all controlled by the sorcerers, and ordinary goblins had no chance to come into contact with it. Back then, when the Mechanical Machinery Academy was first established, Merrill had spent a great deal of effort to apply for a spatial furnace from the higher-ups of the sorcerers to be the source of power for the Mechanical Machinery Academy. Otherwise, it would be wishful thinking to support such a huge mechanical city with the consumption of magic crystals. However, if a spatial furnace wanted to drive the development of the entire Mechanical Machinery Academy, the distribution of magic energy would become increasingly important. There were 106 blast furnaces, 27 smelting factories, 32 foundry workshops, and 106 blast furnaces that needed to be supplied with energy. Apart from that, there were also magic alloy refinement workshops, metal compounding laboratories, magic machinery research centers, magic weapons development centers, and many other research areas that were urgently waiting for the Mechanical Machinery Academy to allocate some magic energy for their research. In a situation where there was a severe shortage of magic energy, Princess Vanessa could only try her best to squeeze out some of the magic energy quota and apply for the rest from the sorcerers. Fortunately, there was Tigul. As the controller of the Grade 2 Goblin Shredder, he had a rather high status in the Crimson family. The batch of magic crystals that he would send back to the Mechanical Machinery Academy every month had become a scarce resource that the goblin engineers and technicians fought over. Every time this happened, the usually sanctimonious green-skinned creatures would argue in the city council, and there were even a few fights that broke out recently. Such a chaotic scene undoubtedly made Princess Vanessa feel even more frustrated, and she could only sneak here to enjoy the scenery. Unfortunately, as the ostensible ruler of the Mechanical Machinery Academy, she still had to deal with the gluttons who needed resources and energy everywhere. Chapter 797. Wizard World, Northern Icy Wind Territory. White Tower. After a few days of recuperation, the once desolate and cold Icy Wind Territory had completely changed. A small village had appeared at the edge of a sparse forest 300 steps away from the White Tower. The houses were all built from logs, looking heavy and sturdy. There were about 30 to 40 families in the village. There was a small circular plaza in the middle of the town, surrounded by a few shops and special buildings. With the protection of the Wizard's Pagoda, the chilly wind blowing from the east had already become much warmer before entering the town. The temperature in the Icy Wind Territory, which was usually around -17 or -8 degrees Celsius, was now fixed at around 0 degrees Celsius. This temperature could no longer interfere with normal outdoor activities. It was difficult to carry out any farming or livestock activities in a place like the Icy Wind Territory, so most of the people living here were hunters. They would choose to enter the border of the dark forest on sunny days to hunt some wild beasts or low-level magical creatures. With the appearance of the White Tower, the magical creatures near the Icy Wind Territory had retreated deep into the dark forest, and these hunters had lost their hunting grounds and prey. But as more and more crimson wizards and apprentices ventured deep into the dark forest, these hunters decided to settle near the White Tower, waiting to be hired and recruited. These spell controllers were undoubtedly the wealthiest group of people. As long as they served these masters well, even a bag of gold coins would be enough for their family to live happily and peacefully for a few months. It was dusk again. This was also the time when the teams of apprentices who had ventured deep into the dark forest returned. If they waited any longer, when night fell, most of the ferocious beasts and magical creatures would begin to wander around without fear. Then it would undoubtedly be a risk to venture into the dark forest again. So, before nightfall, all the teams that had not found a hidden campsite had to return to the White Tower to rest. This was undoubtedly the most lively and noisy time in the town. Treading under the night sky, the 7 members of the Light of Shadow team made their way out of the dark forest with difficulty, chatting and laughing as they walked back to the town. The 5 acolytes were still at the front of the group, while the 2 hunters they hired were dragging a lion-like prey on a simple wooden raft behind them. It had only been half a year, but the Shadow Light team had already undergone tremendous changes. As the leader of the team, Ponter was still a quasi-wizard. His strength had not changed much, but the staff in his hand had changed from the wisdom staff, which could only slightly increase spiritual power, to the Shadow Wand. The wand, which could effectively reduce the difficulty of Ponter casting shadow witchcraft, cost him 200 magic crystals, which was almost a third of his income for the past 6 months. However, with this magic wand, he was able to cast some shadow spells that were difficult to cast. For a quasi-sorcerer whose life was based on witchcraft, this was a wonderful thing. As for the other members of the party, Daxos was still an advanced apprentice, Blanc was still an intermediate apprentice, but the other 2 had undergone shocking changes. The beautiful plant apprentice, Eichel, was now an advanced apprentice, and judging from her full set of witchcraft equipment, she was obviously very favored. The little goblin Locke had changed the most. He was now an advanced goblin magic machinist. Behind it, there was a squeaky puppet that was following it all the time. Don't be fooled by the fact that the puppet was only a meter tall and looked frail and weak. However, in a real battlefield, its effectiveness was comparable to that of 3 to 5 intermediate apprentices. First of all, it was a super monster magnet. The first target of any monsters attracted by the party would definitely be this noisy little guy that kept making ear-piercing noises. Secondly, this little guy's ability to escape and avoid attacks was top-notch. He didn't know how Locke Jr. had researched and developed this puppet machine. Although its attack power was extremely weak, its ability to dodge attacks was shockingly strong. As long as it was attacked by an enemy, it would instantly transform into a spider-shaped puppet beast with 8 metal legs. It would then drill through the dense forest and bushes as if it was walking on flat ground. Monsters that were attracted by it could only chase after it with all their might. They could not even think of touching it. In this way, the members of the Shadow Squad could comfortably attack to their heart's content, taking in powerful beasts and monsters. Even if there was an occasional mistake and the little guy was torn to pieces by agile or flying monsters, as long as the goblin magic machinist Locke was there, no matter how serious the damage was, it could be repaired. It was because of all kinds of strange combat magic machines that the little goblin Locke could quickly grow into an advanced apprentice in just half a year. This also allowed little Locke to successfully enter the ranks of the main force of the Shadow Squad. As soon as the Shadow Squad entered the town, they were surrounded by a group of people who had been waiting for a long time. Under the guidance of the hunters Hank and Soul, everyone worked together and helped to move the Fire Lion's carcass from the simple raft into the town. The Fire Lion was also a common low-level monster in the Black Forest. Seriously speaking, it also had the strength of a beginner grade 1. However, monsters were monsters. Although they were strong enough, their brains and intelligence obviously could not keep up with the progress of their strength. As a result, such a wizard-level fire-type monster was killed by a group of sorcerer apprentices whose average level was no higher than the advanced sorcerer apprentices. The most precious thing on the Fire Lion was the fire crystal core and the warm and soft fiery red mane. The initial value of a wizard-level fire crystal core was estimated to be more than 150 magic crystals. The mane of the Fire Lion was one of the basic materials for making the flame cloak. The initial value was also about 30 magic crystals. In addition, there were also the Fire Lion's fangs, bones, flesh, and whip. These were all spoils of war that could be exchanged for magic crystals. As for the Fire Lion's meat, it was tough and sour, so it was not considered a good ingredient. However, it was precisely because it was cheap and easy to obtain that many physique-tempering apprentices liked to buy it. The adult Fire Lion that the Shadow Squad killed, if carefully dissected, could be harvested for about 200 kilograms of meat. The high-level physique-tempering apprentice Daxos in the team had already decided on 100 kilograms. As for the cost of buying the meat, it would be deducted from his magic crystal income. A highly professional slaughterhouse had already been built in the small town. A more than 200 kilograms of Fire Lion was sent in. In less than a quarter of an hour, it was perfectly butchered and dissected into all kinds of semi-finished products. Then, it was returned to the Shadow Squad by category. On the other hand, the Shadow Squad had only paid 3 magical crystals and some unnecessary bits and pieces. Reaching the small town was actually the end of the journey. All the butchering, classification, evaluation, and sale were done in the small town. The statistical information could be transmitted to the White Tower and the Crimson family at the same time. If any wizard was interested in these spoils of war, they would directly bid for them. When the time came, the transport and storage matters would be handled by professionals from the small town. The Shadow Squad only needed to sit and wait for the magic crystals to enter their bags. This kind of work undoubtedly greatly reduced the pressure on the acolytes in terms of logistics and supplies. It allowed them to have more time to focus on training and improving their combat strength. For most acolytes, although it was important to collect magic knowledge, it was undoubtedly more important to convert every bit of knowledge into corresponding combat strength in a timely manner. After handing over the prey, the two hired hunters returned home with 2 heavy bags of gold coins, beaming with joy. The team of acolytes hugged each other and went to the only tavern in the small town. Here, they met another team of acolytes who were also drinking and celebrating, the Vampire Fong. Just from the name, one could tell that this was a battle team made up purely of acolyte-level vampires. They had 7 members, all of them handsome men and beautiful women in luxurious robes. There was no lack of sharp-eared and fanged blood elves among them. Although these fellows did not have the diverse magic methods of the other acolytes, they relied on the nimble bodies of the vampires and the bat-demon transformation to freely enter and hunt in the dark forest. Especially after the Battle of the Crimson Family, Lady Mary had made great contributions within the family. These low-level vampires also rose with her. In the current Crimson Family, the vampires had impressively become the largest force. Even Tigule, who had the support of an entire secondary plane, could not be compared to her. The vampires, the destiny witches, and the magical goblins. These 3 forces occupied more than 80% of the Crimson Family's resources and status. They supported the entire Crimson Family with the power of a tripod. Of course, this was only a crude opinion of the low-level people. Only the higher-ups of the Crimson Family knew some of the deeper secrets. In the Crimson Family, the true number 1 power was not the vampires, but the hidden grade 3 brain monster, Gaz-Ruvi. In the Battle of the Crimson Family, the rank 3 brain monster Gaz-Ruvi had only shown his strength for a short while, and the allied magi of the 5 large families were utterly defeated. If Grimm was willing to transfer him back to the Magus world from the Lance Plane, the Crimson Family could instantly rise from a small family to a large one. They would only be a step away from the superfamilies. If there was a flaw in the current Crimson Family, it would be the lack of high-grade magi who could control the situation. At the very least, without a rank 3 Magus, the Crimson Family could forget about becoming a large family that outsiders would recognize. Chapter 798. Even though they were both members of the Crimson Family, the atmosphere between them was not harmonious. At the very least, the Fong of Vampires and the Light of Shadows were not on good terms. "Yo, isn't this Ponter who only knows how to collect trash? How did you return safely from the dark forest?" A sweet and gentle voice came from the counter the moment they stepped into the tavern. However, the words caused the expressions of the members of the Light of Shadows team to change slightly. "I was wondering who it was. So it's the most handsome man in the White Tower, Lord Launce. Why are you here drinking to drown your sorrows?" Ponter, who was walking at the front, had a sinister look on his face as he retorted with a sneer. Even though the person who spoke was handsome and had a gentle voice, he was a middle-aged man. He wore an exquisite noble robe, with a noble's coat of arms on his chest. However, the contents of the coat of arms were a little unfamiliar. As this group of vampires all came from the Farn Plain, they were all blood elves. They were all handsome and graceful, with 2 long pointy ears clearly visible amidst their light green long hair. As noble blood elves, these outsiders still retained most of their habits before they were transformed, perfectly inheriting all the strengths and weaknesses of the Farn Forest elves. They were basically a group of members of the Appearance Association that pursued the extremes, deeply hating all creatures that did not have a perfect appearance. Even the wizards in the White Tower who were not handsome enough would often receive their disdain and ridicule, much less a green-skinned gnome like Little Loke. If not for the protective Bloody Mary backing them up, such a group would have long been chased out of the wizard's pagoda by the wizards. Luckily, they knew their place, and did not take the initiative to provoke powerful wizards like the Bug-Lich Bliss. However, in their daily lives and interactions, they still maintained a proud and arrogant attitude, using all their strength to attack the ugly people beside them. Seriously speaking, At least 3.5 out of the 5 members of the Light of Shadows team were rated as unsightly by them. Only the young and beautiful Eek was rated as average. As for the Shadow Wizard Ponter, he barely managed to be rated as okay because of his strength. They were especially disgusted by the green-skinned goblin, Locke. They thought it was a disgrace to have such an ugly creature as their companion. That was why the Blood Elves had more or less crossed paths with all the apprentice squads, and every time, they ended up parting on bad terms. Faced with the humiliation from his apprentice's companions, the goblin Locke's face flushed red and he gritted his teeth. After all, in most material planes, gnomes were synonymous with despicable and lowly. Due to their short lifespan and the lack of knowledge, goblins were viewed as inferior, stupid magical creatures. Furthermore, it was the weakest and most cowardly of all the monsters. It was the most suitable target for beginners to train with. Before stepping out of the goblin plane, he had always been proud of his green skin and his identity as a goblin. It wasn't until he learned the systematic and comprehensive encyclopedia of magical creatures that he found the wizard's sarcastic comments on the goblins that he understood the status and evaluation of the goblins in the eyes of many intelligent races for the first time. It could be said that during this period of time, little Locke had been learning and training crazily for the sake of this outburst of anger. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to prove that the goblins were not as unbearable as described in the Encyclopedia of Magical Creatures. Goblins were also a race full of wisdom and knowledge, not a novice gift bag that could be slaughtered by anyone. Seriously speaking, the goblins were indeed at the bottom of the biological chain of the plane. The main reason for this was that they lacked the ability to sense elemental sorcery. Take little Locke for example. He was now a high-level apprentice, but the magical aura in his body could only be compared to that of a beginner apprentice. As for the Blood Elves, who were born with elemental affinity, it was even more incomparable. It was precisely because their elemental affinity was too low that the goblins were forced to give up on becoming spellcasters. Instead, they turned to researching the combination of magic energy and engineering machinery. Magic machinery was a way out for their race. The bodies of the goblins were too weak, so they had to rely on magic machinery to make up for it. The mana of the goblins was too thin, so they had to rely on magic batteries to replenish it. The goblins lacked the ability to sense and control elemental particles, so they had to rely on magic machinery that they could use easily to make up for it. It was precisely because they had invested the power of their race into the research of magic energy and the control of magic machinery that many goblins had found another way to become magic machinery manipulators. Hence, faced with the mockery of the Blood Elves today, the little goblin who was only 1 meter tall jumped 3 feet high and waved his little fists, hissing, "Duel! Duel! I demand a duel! I will not allow you to insult us goblins. Hurry up and apologize to me, or else I have the right to demand a fair duel." A few of the beautiful Blood Elves at the counter were shaking with laughter, and the male Blood Elf who looked like a gigolo, Lance, was convulsing with laughter. "Ha ha! Ponter, I admire you so much. You actually brought a clown with you on a mission. Ha 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 ha." Ponter's expression became even more ferocious. If not for Eek holding his arm tightly behind him, he would definitely have punched Lance's beautiful face. Although Lance only had the strength of a high-grade lurling, he was not a match for a quasi-wizard like him. However, the Blood Elves were naturally adept at guerrilla warfare, and were not afraid of him in such a narrow and low place. "What, you still dare to doubt little Locke's status as an apprentice?" Blanc, who had always been vicious, said sinisterly. This status as an apprentice was personally announced and bestowed by the master. "Are you doubting the master?" Hearing this, the expressions of the Blood Elves changed. They were also members of the Crimson family, and naturally knew the relationship between Lady Mary and the master. Faced with the public provocation of the other party, they could not help but glare angrily, all of them gnashing their teeth in hatred. Perhaps in their hearts, they really thought that since Lady Mary and the Master were both at grade 2, it was hard to say who would win in a duel. That was why all the Blood Elves were unhappy that Lady Mary was inferior to the Fire Wizard. However, they could only think about it and not say it aloud. Otherwise, not only would they be severely punished by the higher-ups of the family, even Lady Mary would not protect them. Launce took a step forward and roared loudly, "Don't spout nonsense here. I just want to say that these lowly creatures are not fit to be apprentices. They're only fit to lie on the lab table and be dissected by us. Then duel with it." Blanc curled his lips in disdain. "Don't tell me you don't even dare to accept a challenge from a little gnome? All right, we accept the challenge." Just as Launce was about to continue arguing, a cold female voice cut in from behind. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and realized that the one who spoke was the captain of the Vampire Fong Squad, the quasi-blood elf wizard Celia. In the Farron Plain, Celia had once been an elven archer with grade 1 strength. However, after being transformed into a blood elf, her strength had changed too drastically, causing her to revert to the rank of a quasi-wizard. Once she completed the fusion of her body and bloodline power, there was a high chance that she would return to grade 1. Celia had a different mindset and outlook from other apprentices due to the power she once possessed. Therefore, she wasn't bound by the narrow and bigoted sense of beauty. Her crimson eyes quickly scanned Locke's body, and her slender eyebrows couldn't help but knit together. "Big sister, is there a problem?" The blood elves at the side all came over to ask. "Nothing. Maggie, go and warn Launce not to be careless. That green-skinned fellow seems a little strange. Don't let Launce embarrass us blood elves." "Understood, big sister." With the approval of the two prospective sorcerers, this duel was unavoidable. The duel was chosen on the circular square in the middle of the town. It was paved with thick green stones, and there were huge torches burning around it. The terrain was spacious and bright enough, suitable for apprentices to fight and have fun. Anyway, with the apprentices' strength, they could not activate overly powerful spells, so this square of 2 to 3 acres was enough for them to fight to their heart's content. As for the buildings and roads destroyed during the battle, the loser would naturally pay for them. The duel cannot be carried out for nothing. I'm willing to use the Fire Lion Crystal Core as a wager. When the two protagonists of the duel were in position, a large crowd of apprentices gathered around the square to watch the show. Ponter could not help but loudly provoke Celia. "Humph, we won't lose. I'll use a wyvern magic crystal as a wager." Celia was embarrassed and replied loudly. Wyvern magic crystal referred to the magic crystal within the body of a wyvern. Although it was also a Tier 1 magical creature, due to its coarse skin and thick flesh, venomous claws and fangs, and its ability to fly, it was considered to be above average among Tier 1 magical creatures. Its magic crystal was worth more than twice that of the Fire Lion. Seeing such a response from Celia, Ponter's face immediately lit up with excitement. Over the past few days, they had seen the little gnome Loke's battle prowess as his teammates and were well aware of it. Against a similarly high-ranked blood elf, Loke's chances of winning were quite high. Celia looked around at the dense crowd, her expression unchanging. She coldly said, "Since no one has any objections, I hereby announce the start of the duel." Chapter 799. Little Locke wasn't in a hurry to retreat as he faced the rapidly approaching blood elves. Instead, he unhurriedly put on a strange metal hat. In the next second, 3 metal balls the size of fists slowly rose into the air, revealing a ruby embedded in a groove. On the ground, the squeaky puppet that had been following Little Locke all this time suddenly started to expand. As the metal gears continued to grind and extend, a simple magic machine that was 2 meters tall quickly took shape. After doing all this, Little Locke fiercely smashed the button on the metal belt at his waist. In an instant, a full protective force field enveloped him. The invincible belt was a magical item Little Locke had developed himself. Powered by a magical battery, it could support a full protective force field. Since it didn't need to provide magical energy from itself, Little Locke could still divert his attention to other things after activating the invincible belt. There was a dull thud. Lance, who had rushed over, crashed headfirst into the translucent force field. He immediately felt dizzy. But before he could flap his wings and escape, the three slowly rotating metal eyeballs seemed to have received an order and locked onto the bat demon that Lance had transformed into. 3 scarlet, rapid, scorching rays shot out from different angles. 40 degrees, relying on his rich experience, Lance could determine the intensity of the scorching rays the moment they reached him. Although the intensity of the 40 degrees energy rays wasn't great, they had no problem penetrating the bat demon. According to the Blood Elves' attack pattern, they should turn back into human form after closing the distance between them and use their swift attacks to circle around the enemy. But this time, the energy rays were constantly shooting out, forcing Lance to dodge left and right. He couldn't find a chance to attack Little Locke's force field at all. Just as the vampire bat was frantically dodging, the simple magic machine on the ground creaked as it rushed over. The moment they met, the simple magic machine's gift to Lance was a thick, rolling scarlet pillar of fire. Strange alchemy potions sprayed out of the tiny arms, turning into scorching alchemy flames the moment they came into contact with the air. They chased after the vampire bat and burned it. The faces of the few blood elves standing at the side instantly turned extremely unsightly. Damn, why is this little gnome so insidious? It was a good thing that Lance was a quick-witted man. He conjured up a blood mist to protect himself, and flapped his wings desperately to escape the range of the alchemy flames. But as soon as he got out of danger, 3 sizzling scorching rays shot towards him. Lance squeaked as he dodged left and right, barely dodging 2 of them, but the last one pierced straight through his right bat wing, leaving behind a tiny, charred hole. Damn it, let's get rid of these 3 hindering metal balls first. His thoughts racing, Lance no longer cared about the little goblin. Instead, he turned and locked onto a metallic eyeball. As if sensing Lance's intentions, the metal eyeball that had been locked on no longer stopped its attack. Instead, it dashed left and right like a nimble bird in the sky, making irregular movements in a wide area. Although Lance's flying speed was much faster and more agile than the metal eyeballs, it wasn't that easy to catch one that was running away at full speed in such a large area. Moreover, there were 2 more metal eyeballs behind him, sticking to him like glue, constantly attacking with sizzling sound. However, these 2 crafty metal eyeballs didn't get too close to Lance. Once they discovered that Lance had any intention of changing targets, they would instantly switch to bait and hound. For a moment, the 3 metal eyeballs had Lance at a loss as if he was walking a dog. Puppets that didn't have the ability to fly naturally couldn't participate in a battle in the sky. However, under Locke's command, the golem stopped abruptly in one place. Sharp spikes popped out from its wide metal legs to fix its body in place. The metal shell on its back opened up, and goblin fire arrows protruded out from it like a beehive. Locke improved Enhanced Rocket 3 launch as Locke yelled at the top of his lungs. A series of goblin rocket tails spewed out orange alchemy flames, whistling as they soared into the sky. Lance, who'd been tormented by the 3 metal eyeballs, suddenly jolted awake. Only then did he realize that 7 rockets were whistling towards him. Lenz let out a strange cry, turning around and rushing down from the sky. He dashed left and right above the small town, the 7 fire arrows hot on his heels. The trails of fire left beautiful patterns in the dark night sky. In order to escape, Lance couldn't care less about his pride anymore. He dove into the crowd of onlookers, weaving quickly between the legs of the hunters and apprentices. The onlookers were immediately thrown into chaos as they dodged to the left and right to avoid the goblin fire arrows. Locke, who was wearing the thought amplifier, sighed and sent out an invisible command. The 7 goblin rockets that were diving down suddenly changed direction and shot back into the sky, exploding into brilliant fireworks 300 meters up in the night sky. Curses immediately rang out from the surrounding apprentices, evidently dissatisfied with Lance's despicable actions. Celia stood coldly at the edge of the square and scanned the area with her crimson eyes. The voices in the darkness immediately went silent. Lance took advantage of Little Locke's fine control of the goblin rockets to rush into the square. He turned into a tall humanoid shrouded in blood mist and pounced at Little Locke's side. Asterisk whoosh whoosh whoosh. Asterisk for a moment, Rance made full use of his speed and moved quickly around Locke's protective force field. His claws, shrouded in blood mist, left blood-red claw marks on the transparent force field. While the close-range attacks weren't strong, the blood mist attached to them had a terrifying corrosive effect. Thick red smoke rose from the force field amidst a series of sizzling sounds, a thick layer of the energy membrane visibly corroded away. Little Locke broke out in a cold sweat. Under his quick control, the 3 metal eyeballs quickly returned to help, using scorching rays to force Lance away once more. The puppet rose from the floor again and rushed in front of Locke, shielding him behind it. Taking advantage of Little Locke's impatience, Lance forced his way through the scorching rays and successfully destroyed one of the metal eyeballs. However, Lance paid the price of 2 holes in his right shoulder from the scorching rays. If this wasn't a duel, Lance could have rushed into the nearby forest and healed himself by sucking blood. Unfortunately, there was no food for him to recover in the arena. Up until now, he hadn't done any visible damage to Little Locke, so there was no way he could heal by sucking blood. As for the eyeball mech and puppet, there was no flesh for him to absorb either. The few blood elves standing outside the arena could not help but frown. Once again, they felt a deep hatred for the goblin magic machinist, a special class that defied humanity. Perhaps it was the physical damage that made Lance go berserk. He gritted his teeth and chased after the remaining 2 metal eyeballs, using his swift flight and extraordinary agility to destroy them one by one. Without the metal eyeballs to harass him, the clumsy puppet simply couldn't keep up with the blood elf's ghostly figure. Lance used his speed to shake off the puppet once more, imprinting his bloody claws on Little Locke's protective force field. Finally, under the continuous attacks, the translucent force field finally crumbled, revealing the little goblin hiding beneath it. If this was a forest battlefield, Little Locke could have retreated to the periphery with the cover of his teammates and put up a new protective force field after replacing the magic battery on his invincible belt. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to do so in a duel where life and death could be decided in an instant. Taking advantage of this golden opportunity, Lance charged left and right in a frenzy. In order to rush past the puppet wielding its chainsaw and flamethrower, Lance even paid the price of having a large chunk of flesh torn off his left shoulder. However, after moving the puppet machine behind him, there were no more obstacles between him and the little goblin. "Damned little thing, go to hell!" Lance, who'd been stifled for the entire night, roared as he charged at Little Locke. Just as Lance pounced on Little Locke, his body riddled with bloody holes, ready to kill him, the little goblin didn't run away. Instead, he pulled out a small and exquisite energy ray gun. Haha, at a time like this, even the strongest heat ray won't help. Unfortunately, before Lance could finish, a sky-blue ray shot out from the energy ray gun. Blue? Before he could finish his thoughts, Lance's body was enveloped by a layer of blue ice crystals in the span of a finger. The coldness of this layer of ice exceeded that of natural ice. Not only did it freeze Lance's body, it even froze his thoughts at the same time. Little Locke jumped, using the alchemy flames at the back of his rocket boots to charge 100 meters away in one breath before he managed to stabilize himself. Behind him, Lance, wrapped in a lump of blue ice crystals, was like a clumsy wild boar as he streaked across the square and entered a simple wooden hut. A series of terrified screams and the sound of chairs and tables toppling could be heard from the hut. "Freeze ray gun!" Little Locke spun the metal gun around his fingertips in a dashing manner, blowing away the non-existent smoke from the muzzle before sheathing it at his waist leisurely. There were 5 strange pistols of different colors inserted side by side, as if every single one of them corresponded to a different elemental energy beam. Chapter 800. After a long period of repair, the battered flame monarch finally regained its vitality. In the magical secret room on the 5th level of the wizard's pagoda, a small teleportation portal on the flame altar slowly opened. 2 different fire creatures appeared. Due to the existence of the wizard's pagoda's energy defense system, the moment the 2 fire creatures appeared, twisting energy chains extended from the walls of the secret room, bypassing the fire creature on the left and wrapping around the one on the right. "Stand down!" With a loud roar, the defense mechanism of the secret room shut down, and the energy chains that extended around the flame tiger's body dissipated. The blazing flames around his body were extinguished in an instant, revealing Grimm's handsome and youthful face. The fiery red elemental flames quickly turned into a red wizard robe that covered his tall and muscular body. "Sir Sindar, welcome to my wizard's pagoda. I wonder if you plan to leave immediately or find a place to settle down." Being within his own wizard's pagoda, sensing the dense energy spectrum lines and wizard symbols surrounding his body, that incomparable sense of power made him no longer afraid of the level 3 flame tiger's coercion. Even though the flame tiger Sindar was extremely powerful in the fire elemental dimension, he did not dare fight the owner of the wizard's pagoda head-on in the wizard world under the suppression of the will of the dimension. Even though the 2 of them had signed a friendly contract, they could not harm each other. But the methods of wizards were too strange and unpredictable. He could not be sure if the other party had any special methods to bypass the contract and set up a fatal trap for him. So when he heard Grimm's question, he immediately shook his head and said, "I still have some matters to attend to. You can release the authority of the wizard's pagoda and send me into the sea of lava. If that's the case, then I will not keep Sir Sindar. Please." Under Grimm's control, not long after the teleportation portal on the flame altar had closed, a new teleportation portal slowly opened up. Through the dark red energy portal, he could faintly feel the raging flame energy on the other side of the portal. The rumbling sound of flowing lava was endless. Using his mental power to sense, Sindar confirmed that the opposite side was indeed a free sea of lava. Without any hesitation, he dived in and disappeared without a trace. After the door of light closed once again, Grimm pondered for a moment before closing his eyes to sense everything within the wizard's pagoda. It seemed like the wizard's pagoda had suffered grave damage some time ago, and several regions at the lower levels of the wizard's pagoda had already broken free from the control of the energy defense system. Many energy black holes had also appeared on the defense network of the wizard's pagoda. This also meant that the energy nodes within the walls of the wizard's pagoda had already been damaged, and it would be difficult for them to reach their previous state of fusion without undergoing a large-scale repair. Grimm's mental energy tentacles were like an octopus, extending and circulating within the wizard's pagoda wantonly along the energy network, silently evaluating the repercussions of the previous battle. Other than the damage done to the wizard's pagoda, Grimm could also sense that there were more than a dozen wizards' spiritual seas within the pagoda. The soul aura of these wizards was unfamiliar, but they had all left their soul imprints within the wizard's pagoda's control crystal. As the owner of the wizard's pagoda, Grimm naturally had the highest authority. He quickly read through everything that had happened in the wizard's pagoda over the past 6 months, including the tragic battles that had taken place around the wizard's pagoda. Soon, he completely understood the origins of these unfamiliar magi. They were wizard captives who had chosen to work for the Crimson family to atone for their crimes. In the control crystal of the wizard's pagoda, Grimm also found many pieces of wizard information from the Lance dimension and the Gnome dimension. There were even more pieces of wizard information from the Lance dimension in the wizard's pagoda's control crystal, as if Gazlervi was eager to talk to him. After a moment's hesitation, Grimm used the control crystal to contact Gazlervi, who was far away in the Lance dimension. Unexpectedly, as soon as he connected with Gazlervi's mind, a familiar soul ripple entered his mind. Grimm, you're finally back. Hurry up and help me. As long as you can get my Redina back, I'm willing to form a partner contract with you. It was the Lightning Dragon Arms. The so-called partner contract was actually a more elegant way of referring to the giant dragon's enslavement contract. Once a giant dragon signed such a contract with someone, it would not be able to reject the other party's request to fight. However, as a partner, the other party would not be able to force it to fight against enemies that were too powerful. In most of the material planes, intelligent races could only become dragon knights by signing a partner contract with a giant dragon. The situation that a level 3 lightning dragon was willing to give up part of its freedom must be very troublesome. That was why Grimm did not agree to Arm's request rashly. Instead, he tried to find out all the secrets from Arms. As expected, Arms was willing to become Grimm's contract dragon because he wanted Grimm to help him deal with a powerful level 4 giant dragon, Escarwhale the Blue Sky Wing. After Arms had lured the Emerald Dragons and Green Dragons to the Lance Dimension, he had indeed lived a carefree and happy life. Unfortunately, the proud Redina was not someone that could be restrained by a small level 3 giant dragon's territory. She led the Green Dragons on a campaign and conquered the territories of 3 level 2 giant dragon lord. One of the defeated giant dragons was a direct subordinate of the Blue Sky Wing, Escarwhale the Blue Sky Wing. Hence, as expected, the reckless actions of Aratina and the other dragons had attracted the attention of this powerful Tier 4 giant dragon. However, out of the expectations of all the dragons, the moment Azure Sky Wing Escarwhale saw her, he was attracted by her stunning beauty. After a series of boisterous interactions, the Blue Sky Wing Escarwhale had successfully captured the heart of the Tier 3 Emerald Dragon race beauty Aratina. The two of them had actually gotten together very quickly, living and working together. When Arms realized that the situation was bad and hurried over, he was taught a lesson by Escarwhale the Blue Sky Wing. With the Thunder Dragon's strength, Arms was naturally no match for a Tier 4 dragon. Hence, he had been suppressing his frustration for a long time now. In the end, he hardened his heart and came to Grimm to ask for help. If not for the fact that he was at his wits' end and could not find anyone to help him deal with a Tier 4 giant dragon, he would never have taken the initiative to extend an olive branch to a sorcerer. After all, entering a partnership contract with a sorcerer could cost him his freedom for the rest of his life. Before meeting Grimm, the Tier 3 Thunder Dragon Arms had still been debating over whether or not it was worth it. Now, however, after making his request to Grimm, Arms could not help but feel anxious when he sensed Grimm's hesitant mental undulations. He was actually worried that Grimm would reject him. After all, agreeing to Arms's request meant that he would have to face a Tier 4 giant dragon head-on. Even Tier 4 sorcerers would have to think twice before making a decision. While Grimm was pondering and frowning, a hidden and obscure secret message was transmitted into his mind. Agree to it. I can think of a way to deal with a Tier 4 giant dragon. It was Alice's voice. With Alice's guarantee, Grimm instantly calmed down. After hesitating for a while, he pretended to reluctantly agree to Alice's request. Seeing that the mysterious sorcerer had agreed to his request, Arms could not help but let out a long cry of excitement. Then it's settled. As long as you help me defeat Skrill and take back Aratina, I'll immediately sign a partnership contract with you. Grimm snorted coldly. I'll do my best to defeat Skrill, but I can't promise you anything about taking back Aratina. That's fine too. I can swear in the name of the Dragon God that as long as you take Skrill away from Aratina, I'll immediately sign a partnership contract with you. His heart burning with anger, Arms sliced his dragon claw without hesitation and swore a powerful oath using the origin contract. Then just wait for my news. I'll arrange this as soon as possible. After comforting Arms, Grimm cut off his communication with the Lance realm and silently contacted Alice, who was far away in the Tower of Destiny. Alice seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. Their mental pulses instantly connected through the wizard's pagoda. Alice, are you really confident that you can deal with a Tier 4 giant dragon? Grimm could not help but ask doubtfully. To be honest, with the Crimson family's current strength, they would not be able to deal with a Tier 4 giant dragon even if they mobilized all their forces. If they made a mistake and exposed their metal fortress, Zruvi might even be expelled from the Lance realm by the giant dragons. At that time, without the indestructible metal fortress, the Crimson family's massive profits in the Lance realm would be gone. The damage the Crimson family would bring to the Crimson family was immeasurable. That was why Grimm was extra concerned about Alice's thoughts. Don't worry, I already have a plan for this. Alice comforted him with a gentle tone. We won't need the family's strength to deal with that Tier 4 giant dragon. You mean, yeah, those Grade 4 old northern witches still owe me a favor. Now is the time for them to repay it. Tier 4 witches? Since Alice had said so, it meant that the Crimson family was going to open up the Lance realm, which was rich in dragon resources, to the northern witches. Although it was a pity, when Grimm thought about the powerful Tier 4 giant dragons in the Lance realm, he felt that there was nothing he could do about it. After all, if the Crimson family did not get rid of the Tier 4 giant dragons, it would be wishful thinking for them to swallow the entire Lance realm. Chapter 801. Grimm had been away from the family for half a year. Now that he was back, all sorts of family matters that had been piling up for a long time were presented to him. Just the matters related to the Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda alone took Grimm 5 days to settle. The sudden war between Magi families had almost caused the Blazing Flame Monarch to run dry, and they had almost lost their entire family. Even though they had won in name, the Crimson family was lacking in power and could not convert the fruits of their victory into benefit. Thus, other than obtaining 24 Magi as captives, the Crimson family had gained almost nothing from the war. In fact, the enemy had once attacked the Wizard's Pagoda and severely damaged the lower levels. Grimm would have to invest a large amount of magical crystals to completely repair it. If this had been a normal war between Magi families, Grimm, as the victor, would naturally have been able to plunder enough magical crystals and resources from the 5 defeated Magi to make up for the losses of his family. But now the enemy had been pushed back, and the Crimson family could not send enough forces to occupy or plunder the enemy's direct territories or resource points. Thus, a large amount of benefits flowed into the pockets of some outsiders. As the leader of the rank 5 Magi factions, the Kamara family had suffered great losses in the war. However, they relied on their clan's strength to remain intact. They actually turned around and annexed the demonic forest hut. Moreover, they also plundered the other clans that suffered heavy casualties. Using this method, the Kamara family's strength did not decrease, but instead increased, becoming even more difficult to deal with than before. Before this, due to the lack of Grimm as their backbone, the Crimson family had been able to protect themselves but had not been aggressive enough, giving up on some great opportunities. Now that Grimm had returned, the Crimson family's morale immediately rose. After a discussion with Gargamel, Grimm declared war on the Kamara family in the name of the leader of the Crimson family. He sent the worm Lich Bliss, Mary, and the rest to attack the Kamara family's territories and resource points in retaliation. In the scattered forest of towers in the center of the continent, large-scale wars were not allowed between Magi families without sufficient excuses. Now that the Kamara family had just attacked the Crimson family, it was reasonable for Grimm to use this as an excuse to attack them in retaliation. At the very least, even though the old fellows scattered around the Talon region did not like the Crimson family, they could not find any fault with them. They could only silently watch as the flames of war rose in the Kamara family's territory, and the flames of war once again ignited. Of course, the Crimson family did not launch a conventional war, but a retaliatory attack. Thus, the Crimson family had not mobilized any regular armies, but had only sent out 6 magi as a symbolic gesture. However, it was precisely these 6 magi that caused the Kamara family to be badly battered and exhausted from dealing with them. The reason was simple. The 6 magi sent by the Crimson family were all Tier 2 magi. Moreover, there was no lack of powerful fellows like the insect lich Bliss. If one of the mags for magi were to compare, the maging the point, the maging magi maging god, the only maging magi magus. Unfortunately, Bliss and Mary's whereabouts were uncertain. They did not start a direct battle with the Kamara family, instead devouring one resource point after another and their territories. If the magi of the Kamara family dared to leave the wizard's pagoda, they would be surrounded and attacked by a group of magi. Thus, in less than 2 months, the Kamara family, which had just risen to fame, had lost 7 resource points, over 3,000 troops, and 5 magi of the family. The Kamara family was in a state of panic. They had lost close to half of their territory, and the family's reputation was crushed. Just as the family war was in full swing, Grimm had already left the blazing flame monarch and arrived at the Gnome Plain. Grimm received Princess Vanessa and dozens of gnome nobles from all over the plain at the top of the wizard's pagoda in the center of the city. Accompanying Grimm was the great gnome sage Cabby, who acted as the middleman. The other low-level gnomes and gnome believers did not know much about Cabby's true identity, but he could not hide it from the leaders of the gnome nobles and corporations who held great power. The gnomes had become submissive in the past, perhaps because they were afraid of the might of the magi. However, after such a long period of contact and cooperation, and knowing that they were powerless to resist the Crimson family's rule, these nobles and tycoons began to have thoughts of working together with the magi to obtain more benefits in the plain. Cabby, who had been constantly on the move between the Gnome Plain and the Magus world, had clearly seen through their intentions. He had connected the dots, and today's meeting had been arranged. Using today's meeting, the gnomes would express their loyalty to Grimm, the leader of the Magi, in order to gain his trust and reach a deeper cooperation. From today onwards, the goblins of the Goblin Plain would be able to make use of the sorcerer's system to extend their tentacles and reach out to places beyond the plain. This way, the gnomes would be able to break away from their status as slaves, and become the Crimson family's partners and strategic allies. Grimm didn't object to this either. The Crimson family's trade network in the Magus world was still too narrow. One of the main reasons was that they lacked many loyal and reliable people. Now, the few corporations and merchant groups in the Gnome Plain had gathered here, all expressing their willingness to help Cabby open up the various trade routes. This was something that had many advantages and no disadvantages for the Crimson family. After agreeing to the goblin's request, Grimm left Cabby there to bargain with the goblin nobles and tycoons, while he followed Princess Vanessa to a secret chamber. Lord Grimm, as the city lord of Floating Mech City, I would like to make a request to you. I would like to request for a space furnace. The energy here is too scarce, and it is not enough to support the expansion of Floating Mech City. Seeing Princess Vanessa kneeling in front of him with a calm expression, Grimm did not agree to her request hastily. Back in the day, the amount of Kalos alloy he had obtained from the entire Steel City was only enough for Grimm to create 5 space furnaces. He had used one set to create the magic furnace for the Metal Fortress, another set to create the Tier 2 Goblin Ripper, and another set to create the floating ship, which had crashed in the Farron Plain. Previously, the Grade 3 brain monster Gazruvi had paid a huge price to save the blazing flame monarch, and Grimm had already promised to build another magic furnace for it. Under such circumstances, Grimm only had the materials for one more space furnace left. Hence, Grimm was not surprised to reject Vanessa's request. Space furnaces had mystical powers that allowed them to continuously provide magical energy to their users. Of course, this kind of power could only be controlled by trusted subordinates, and Vanessa obviously did not fit that criteria. If she was allowed to control this power, it was hard to guarantee that she would not drift further away from the Magi, and develop dangerous thoughts that she should not have. Seeing Vanessa leave dejectedly, Grimm did not feel the slightest bit of pity or regret. He could sense that Princess Vanessa's hatred towards Magi had not been completely dispelled, and was even becoming more intense. If she really did not know what was good for her, and would rather lose a grade 2 subordinate like Tigul, Grimm had to get rid of such an unstable factor. After returning to the Magus world from the Gnome Plain, Grimm went to the White Tower in the north. As a newly established area, it was much more lively than the last time he had been here. The arrival of the 16 new sorcerers had undoubtedly filled many vacancies within the family, giving each branch and discipline a driving force. There was no longer a blank space like before. Grimm used 10 days to meet these new Magi one by one and get to know them better. Though they had chosen to submit under the threat of death, their arrival had truly supported the Crimson family's structure. Without them, the Crimson family would always be in an awkward situation where a few powerful Magi dominated the world, while the rest of the Magi cheered them on. With the increase in the number of Magi in the family's resources were starting to run out. At this point, even Grimm could not help but think about how to earn more magical crystals and resources to support such a large group of Magi. Of course, finding a suitable place to build a resource point was something that most Magus families would do. However, the family would first need to invest a large sum of money and resources in order to make the resource point operate smoothly. The Crimson family, which had just experienced a tragic war, obviously could not fork out such a sum of money. Left with no choice, Grimm turned his attention back to the Lance Plain. The previous few dragon hunting operations had brought the family 2 to 3 million magical crystals, and this was still fresh in Grimm's mind. Hence, now that he was short of money, Grimm's first thought was the group of giant dragons. After experiencing the hardships in the Fire Plain, Grimm felt that he had gained a lot. This was especially so after handing over the mission item to the mysterious Magus. The shackles on his soul had been swept away, and Grimm's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. He had only become a grade 2 Magus less than 30 years ago, but he could already see a glimmer of hope in advancing to grade 3. However, he still did not have a solid foundation, and his knowledge of magic was insufficient. Hence, these days, Grimm spent most of his time traveling around, doing his best to settle the family's internal affairs. Chapter 802. This was a small campsite near the trade route. Trees, shrubs, brambles, and other miscellaneous items were all cleared out. Not far away, there was even a small stream flowing by. It was the best place for traveling merchants and travelers to rest for the night. The sky had just turned dark, and this place was already packed with people. Large merchant groups would occupy a corner of the campsite, using large carriages and wagons to mark out a small area as their resting place. On the other hand, ordinary merchants and pedestrians would gather in groups of 2s and 3s, lighting bonfires and attentively preparing for tonight's dinner. The fragrance of the vegetable soup and the rumbling of the jerky in the soup pot were enough to make every hungry traveler's throat move, and they could not help but lick their lips. Some of the women who had come with the caravan would meet up and walk towards the stream nearby, wanting to freshen up and solve some problems that were bothering them before dinner. After being restrained in the carriage for an entire day, it was rare for them to have a moment of leisure. Their bell-like laughter could be heard from the forest far away, causing some men to tiptoe and look around. The entire campsite was filled with a relaxed atmosphere. Clop clop clop. The crisp sound of horse hooves could be heard along the trade route. In the darkness, a black-clothed man in a cloth robe slowly rode his horse into the bustling temporary campsite. Perhaps intimidated by the other party's cold aura, the sounds in the campsite gradually quietened down. All the men could not help but put down what they were doing and straighten their backs, silently sizing up this newcomer. This was a demonized white horse from the Salovia region. Not only was it majestic, its temperament and ferocity were not inferior to low-ranked magical beasts. Hence, unless one was a powerful knight, it would be impossible for them to ride such a magical horse. The person riding on the magical horse was dressed in a black robe, and not an inch of his skin was exposed. The hood completely covered his face in the deep shadows, giving off a cold and gloomy feeling from afar. On the chest of this black-robed man, everyone saw a strange emblem of a burning iron fist. "It's someone from the Crimson family. Is it a magus or an acolyte?" "I don't know." Those who could appear in the camp were all experienced and knowledgeable fellows who had traveled extensively. They immediately recognized the identity of the newcomer. Just a moment ago, there was some confusion and vigilance in his eyes, but in the blink of an eye, it was covered with a thick layer of fear. Everyone who was stared at hurriedly bowed, their faces filled with flattering smiles. "Who are the people from Du Luo's caravan?" The black robe sitting high on the demon horse shouted in a deep voice. Hearing Black Robe call out a name, the hundreds of people in the camp instantly focused their attention on the team in the corner of the camp. There were 7 or 8 light carriages and 13 or 14 people dressed like adventurers and mercenaries. Among them was a man who was also wearing a cloth robe. He had short golden hair and looked very young. Noticing that the others were looking at him, the golden-haired man tore off his cloak, revealing a short gray apprentice robe underneath. "Since these dregs of the Crimson family have caught up, comrades, let's fight it out with them." Following the golden-haired man's low roar, half of the 13 teammates actually removed their robes, revealing the various types of armor and defensive equipment inside. "It's an acolyte, the Kamara family." There was no lack of people in the camp who were familiar with the local situation and immediately recognized the identity of this group of people. Damn it, it was rumored that the Kamara family and the Crimson family were at war. If they were to fight here, the previously peaceful and tranquil camp instantly became chaotic. Regardless of whether they were male or female, old or young, everyone fled to the distance. And in this chaotic camp, Black Robe, who had jumped off the demon horse, started fighting with 10 or so acolytes from the Kamara family. Black Robe was not a magus, but only a quasi-magus. The Kamara family that was opposing him was a small team consisting of 4 high-grade acolytes, 3 mid-grade acolytes, and 7 warriors from the family. Just as the two sides gathered together, the Kamara family's 7 acolyte-level spells were launched at them. Unfortunately, they were all blocked by a wall of wind that rose from the ground. Bang bang bang. The successive explosions of spells shook the wall of wind, causing it to tremble and surge as it disappeared along with the first wave of attack. "It's a wind element quasi-magus. Cole, you go up. Ariel, you, Anna, and Tony are in charge of long-range attacks. Brother Lai, Grey Ear, you guys go up with me." Under the command of the golden-haired man, the 7 acolytes from the Kamara family quickly surrounded the Crimson acolyte and launched fierce attacks from all directions. As for the family warriors that were protecting them, they all shouted and raised their weapons and defensive equipment, bravely charging towards their only enemy. In an instant, scarlet fireballs the size of a human head, dazzling lightning bolts that blinded the eyes, chilly ice blades and snow blades, green and sticky acid arrows, and earth spears that rose from the ground. Numerous spells engulfed the entire battlefield like beautiful fireworks, engulfing all the acolytes and warriors. Although the physique of a sorcerer apprentice was not necessarily much better than that of a family's warrior, the witchcraft protection that lingered around their bodies truly protected their frail bodies. Amidst the rapid witchcraft attacks, the 7 family warriors had undoubtedly become the first batch of sacrifices in this war between apprentices. Whether it was the spells that exploded on the crimson quasi-sorcerer's defensive shields or the rotating wind blades that were casually released by the opponent, they were all fatal to this group of warriors who did not have any defensive spells. Amidst the rumbling of witchcraft, several warriors of the family fell one after another. Their bodies, which were wearing leather or chainmail armor, were full of elemental scars and bloody holes of all sizes. Not to mention the ice blades and snow blades, even a normal cold air could directly freeze a powerful warrior to death. Compared to the power of elemental spells, the swords and shields in the hands of the family warriors were almost harmless. Perhaps their only purpose on the battlefield was to attract the opponent's attention and firepower, and when necessary, they could also act as human shields. The battle only lasted for a quarter of an hour before it quickly ended. The victor was, of course, the stronger quasi-sorcerer. When there was no one in the opponent's team who could contend against him, a one-sided massacre was the most common scene. One by one, the sorcerer apprentices were cut into pieces by the terrifying whirlwind tornadoes, lying in pools of blood on the verge of death. Even that body-refining apprentice was severed at the waist by a transparent wind blade, the internal organs and debris scattered on the ground in his abdomen and chest cavity. Among the 7 sorcerer apprentices, only the golden-haired man was left kneeling in the bloody battlefield, panting heavily. His body, hands, and face were covered in fine and dense scratches. Even the slightest movement would cause deep black lines of blood to flow out of the wounds like earthworms. He panted heavily, completely ignoring the fine bloody wounds on his face. He stared fiercely at the quasi-sorcerer who was still healing himself at the side of the battlefield. Having just experienced a bloody battle, the opponent could not escape unscathed under the desperate counterattack of the 7 fierce sorcerers. The black robe on the opponent's body was burned to a mess by the flames. There was a fist-sized bloody hole on the left side of his waist, and his right shoulder was pierced by an acid arrow. Traces of ice and lightning could be seen on the other parts of his body. This quasi-sorcerer was also a young man with a sinister face. At this moment, he took out a bubbling purplish-red potion and used his finger to open the cork. After hesitating for a moment, he clenched his teeth and fell on the wound that was pierced by the acid arrow. With a light sizzling sound, white smoke billowed from the wound. The young quasi-sorcerer let out a short scream towards the sky. Green veins popped out on his forehead, and large beads of sweat rolled down. After using the purifying potion to clean up the remaining corrosive liquid in the wound, the bone-piercing pain slowly subsided. He took out some hemostatic ointment and healing potions and quickly cleaned the remaining wounds on his body. Only then did the young quasi-sorcerer feel completely at ease. Even though he was now riddled with wounds and on the verge of collapse, the ferociousness and might that were embedded in his bones still deeply shocked the people who were hiding in the distance. Although he was not a magus, the powerful aura of brutally killing his enemies and controlling their life and death in his hands made him a conqueror that was above everyone else. Looking down on everyone, he felt a strong sense of satisfaction and pride, as if he was a lion on top of a cliff, slowly scanning his territory and subjects. If the merchants, guards, and laborers in the camp were all pigs, horses, cows, and sheep, then at this moment, he was a majestic wolf that looked down on the entire field. Moreover, he was a lone wolf that was even more ferocious and ruthless, bathed in blood. No matter how heavily injured he was, as long as he was still standing, not a single livestock would dare to approach him. After quickly dealing with the wounds on his body and waiting until they were no longer a hindrance, the young quasi-sorcerer took large strides towards the corpse of his enemy that was in a pitiful state, and began to carefully search for the special item. Unfortunately, even after completely searching through the corpse, he still could not find the target of the mission, even if he did not let go of the pieces of flesh that had been sliced by the tornado. The young quasi-sorcerer's expression immediately darkened, and he quickly set his sights on the high-ranked apprentice that was still alive. "Tell me, where is the storage ring that you secretly brought out?" If you hand it over, I can let you live. Otherwise, the young quasi-sorcerer took 2 steps forward and casually waved his hand. A green wind blade quickly gathered in his palm. The golden-haired man knew that he was going to die, so he was unusually stubborn. You dogs of the Crimson family, even if you kill me, I will not tell you anything. Before he finished speaking, a green light brushed past the golden-haired man's side. His right arm that was supporting him from the ground was cut off at the elbow, and the surging blood instantly drenched the ground below him. Chapter 803. After a simple interrogation, the young quasi-sorcerer finally managed to pry out the whereabouts of the item from the dying blonde man. A few days ago, Lady Mary had just led a team to destroy a level 2 resource point belonging to the Kamara family. The Kamara family's magi stationed there died on the spot, but the resources stored in the Secret Plains warehouse were reduced by more than half. Many Scarlet acolytes were sent out to hunt down the remaining members of the Kamara family who had escaped, and he was undoubtedly very lucky to actually be able to intercept the group of sorcerer apprentices who had sneaked out from the resource point here. According to the Scarlet family's rules, he had the right to take 1/3 of the spoils of war. Once he thought of the huge amount of resources in the level 2 resource point, the young quasi-sorcerer's face revealed a strange smile of pain and happiness. The storage ring that contained a large amount of resources was hidden in the accompanying carriage of the apprentice team. When the young quasi-wizard happily cut off the head of the blond man and strode towards one of the carriages, a gloomy old man wearing a white robe stepped out of the darkness with a magic staff that was even taller than him in his hand and sneered. In front of his chest hung a maple grass emblem of the Kamala family. Sorcerer. An official sorcerer. The Scarlet quasi-sorcerer, who had dominated the battlefield just a moment ago, was so scared that he kept retreating. He looked at the Kamara family magus, who had suddenly appeared, and muttered something. As if remembering how terrifying a magus was, the Scarlet quasi-sorcerer shouted and wanted to escape into the darkness. However, a black tentacle extended from the ground and instantly wrapped around him, making it hard for him to move. With a bang, he fell into a pool of blood that had yet to congeal. Stay there. If I find out that you do anything dishonest, you know what the consequences will be. The sinister old man hissed at the Scarlet quasi-sorcerer coldly. After saying this, he walked in front of a pack horse that was pulling a carriage and stabbed the stomach of the horse like a knife with his right hand. How could this pack horse withstand such a terrifying injury? After bouncing a few times, it twitched and fell to the ground, dead. When the old man pulled his right hand out of the bloody stomach of the pack horse, a large amount of filthy and smelly substances poured out. In the middle of this filth, a glistening yellow bronze ring rolled out. Ha ha! Luckily these little fellows are smart enough to bring back all the resources stored in that resource point for the past 5 years. Now the family's shortage of potions has been reduced by more than half, ha ha. Then, just as the sinister old man was about to reach for the storage ring, the ground where the ring was located suddenly cracked, and endless black beetles surged out like a tide. The ring was instantly submerged in the sea of black beetles. Damn it, it's a bug shaman. The old man instantly understood what was going on. He tapped the magic wand in his hand, and a strange ripple spread out from under his feet in all directions. All the black beetles that stepped into the ripples struggled in pain for a few seconds before exploding into balls of bloody paste, instantly dyeing the area around the old man into a colorful sauce jar. After blocking the swarm's attack, the old man quickly took out a small reagent bottle and poured the medicine inside into his mouth. When the green wings of wind behind him lifted him up quickly, a sharp whistling sound came from the surrounding void. 3 or 4 transparent shadows flashed past the old man's body. The old man only had time to let out a scream before he turned into a pile of body parts that fell from the sky. The sinister-looking old man only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before he turned into a pile of scattered corpse pieces that rained down from midair. The scarlet sorcerer crawled up from the ground, not bothering to check his injuries. He quickly flashed the badge on his chest and said loudly, "Greetings, Lord Bliss." The scarlet quasi-shaman crawled up from the ground, not bothering to check the injuries on his body. He quickly flashed the badge on his chest and said loudly, "Greetings, Lord Blitz." Actually, the bug shaman Bliss had yet to appear. He did not even have time to check his injuries. He quickly flashed the badge on his chest and said loudly, "Greetings, Lord Bliss." In fact, the insect Lich Bliss had yet to appear at this moment. The insects that were lingering around the Magus' flesh and blood carried the storage ring and slowly walked to the crack in the ground. In the next moment, the bug shaman Bliss had yet to appear. The beetles surrounded by the sorcerer's flesh carried the storage ring and slowly moved to the crack in the ground. In the next moment, more black beetles piled up and slowly formed a strange human figure. The reward for this mission is on your head. Take this ring to Lady Mary to receive your reward. Thousands of squirming black beetles pieced together to form a lifelike humanoid sorcerer. The beetles opened their mouths and spat out noisy and hoarse cries. Soon after, the ring was thrown into the young quasi-sorcerer's arms. Ander was overjoyed when he heard this. He carefully kept the ring in his pocket. "Have you cleared out the people in this camp?" The beetles turned around and looked at the terrified people hiding in a corner of the camp. "Not yet." Ander quickly took out a piece of paper and read it aloud. "Master Insect Shaman, I've investigated. There are 2 teams in this camp that belong to the Kamara family." "Who?" the beetles shrieked. "The Red Leaf Trading Company and the Giant Deer Caravan. The Red Leaf Trading Company belongs to the Kamara family, Earl Wenritha's territory. The Giant Deer Caravan has 70% investment from the Kamara family." Like a death sentence, the people in the crowd who belonged to the 2 teams shuddered and their teeth chattered as Ander named the names. The people around them ran away from them. "How dare you work with the Kamara family? Go to hell," as the insect shaman growled. The black swarm of beetles drowned the powerless commoners. The tide-like swarm of beetles moved left and right among the crowd. They did not hurt anyone who was not involved. They only dragged the people who belonged to the 2 teams into the sea of beetles. When the gnawing sounds disappeared, the black beetles returned to the insect shaman's feet. There were more than 20 white skeletons in the camp. There was not even a trace of flesh or bones left on them. After cleaning up the campsite, the worm wizard dispersed into tens of thousands of black beetles again, burrowing into the ground and disappearing without a trace. The victorious scarlet sorcerer Ander did not dare to stay any longer. He jumped on his magic horse and galloped into the darkness. Only when the surroundings of the camp had completely calmed down did the people who had hidden in the nearby forest dare to slowly enter the camp. Seeing the ground covered in blood and the corpses strewn all over the place, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. In this world ruled by magi, as commoners without any extraordinary powers, they did not have the right to participate in the magi's disputes. No matter how much trouble the 2 magi families had, there would always be a day when they would sit down and negotiate. However, commoners like them, if they were to get involved, other than dying a dubious death, there was no other possibility. Just from the situation tonight, it was obvious that the newly established Scarlet family had the upper hand. Not only did they occupy the other party's resource point, they even dared to kill the acolytes and magi of the opposing side. This clearly showed the huge difference in strength between the 2 sides. It was said that the Scarlet family did not even have a rank 3 magus, while the Kamara family had a rank 3 magus to support them. How did the battle strength of the 2 sides flip? The people who did not know much about the secrets of these magi could only sigh and sigh as they packed up their belongings and left the temporary camp that night. A magus of the Kamara family had died here, so the other side would definitely not send people to investigate. If they continued to stay here, they would definitely become the target of revenge and investigation. Therefore, most of the caravans and travelers quietly left the campsite, leaving this land of constant war without looking back. Vilnan, the location of the Northern Witch Council. In a magic secret room in the ancient castle, Alice was happily chatting with a few powerful witch leaders. Logically speaking, the witches who could appear here were all rank 4 witch leaders, and Alice's insignificant rank 2 witch leaders should not even be here. However, with the strange ability of the Destiny Witches, none of the witch leaders dared to ignore Alice's words. After all, the strength of the Destiny Witches depended on their compatibility with the power of destiny, not the level of their own strength. Of course, the stronger they were, the stronger their ability to control the power of destiny. For any witch leader, this was something they could only be close to, not hostile. In fact, in the past, when the first Destiny Witch was at her strongest, she could give any witch leader a powerful destiny aura of +3 luck. This also meant that in the next year, this witch leader could become the darling of the power of destiny, and always be in a state of overflowing good luck. How terrifying was the power of +3 luck! With +1 luck, it meant that this lucky person could eat gold beans when eating, drink water could produce gold bars, go out and meet a noble, go into a mountain and meet a vixen who came to repay a debt of gratitude, jump off a cliff and meet a powerful old man who was eager to take in a disciple. With +2 luck, it was completely possible to walk calmly in a sea of fire and sleep soundly in a forest of spears and arrows. Just by casually checking one's background, one could find out that one was the descendant of a powerful wizard. With +3 luck, one could win every bet. No matter how small the odds were, in her hands she would always win. If she fought with a powerful enemy, the enemy would either bite her tongue while chanting a spell, or accidentally backfire on her witchcraft, causing half of her body to be paralyzed. In short, witches with the blessing of luck were simply ridiculously strong. Although the current rank 2 Alice did not have such a terrifying blessing ability, many witch leaders saw her strong development potential and were still willing to wait for her to continue to grow. Chapter 804. Alice, why did you summon all of us here this time? After the previous witch council, the leaders no longer dared to underestimate this young witch who had completely taken control of the Tower of Destiny. Hence, the leader of the Witches of Death, Thuna, could only frown and ask impatiently. Over the years, the expansion of the Witches of Death in the plains had not been smooth. They were fighting to the death with the orcs of the world of gods in various planes. At this critical juncture, anyone who was dragged from the bloody planar battlefield to this ancient castle that was about to completely decay would be filled with impatience, and impatience like Thuna. Although the other 2 witch leaders did not speak, their expressions were similar. As far as I know, it seems that none of you have caught a suitable magic pet yet. Among the witches, Alice's age was not even a fraction of that of the others. Naturally, she could only humble herself and use gentle means to win over everyone. Do you have a suitable introduction? Thuna's expression changed. How about a rank 4 dragon pet? Alice asked, smiling mysteriously. Where is it? Is there a group of dragons protecting it? Which lineage is it? As soon as Alice finished speaking, the 3 Tier 4 witches could not help but ask again and again. Even Circe, the leader of the Dark Witches who had the worst relationship with Alice, could not help but have her eyes light up. To be honest, when other Tier 4 witches talked about dragons of the same tier, they would probably frown as if they were facing a great enemy. However, the group of Tier 4 witches in front of her were all beaming with joy at the mention of Tier 4 dragons. They looked as if they would immediately rush over to rob Alice of the location. If Grimm could see this scene, he would definitely feel a little sad for the future of the Tier 4 dragons in the Lance Plane. You know that the wizard who has been supporting me from behind has a dragon plane, Alice said hesitantly, her pretty face suddenly flushing red. A dragon plane. The 3 Tier 4 witches let out sighs of happiness at the same time. Even Sylvia, the leader of the Pale Witches, could not help but tremble. Of course, this wasn't fear, but an exaggerated expression of extreme excitement. I've long heard of the dragon plane. I heard that the sky is filled with dragons, and there are dragon nests everywhere. There are dragons of all lineages, and we can capture any dragon we want. I've always dreamed that if I could have such a plane, I'd definitely faint from happiness. Sylvia licked her lips, and spoke of the restlessness in her heart in a dreamy tone. Although the other 2 older witch leaders were not as excited as Sylvia, their passionate and bright eyes revealed their true feelings. Alice, are you saying that the control of that plane is still in the hands of that wizard? Thona asked with a calm expression. Alice nodded silently. I'm going to meet that wizard. Circe stood up and said, How can such a good thing fall into the hands of a weak wizard? I'll pay him enough to get the world waymark from the dragon plane. Alice's eyes immediately widened in shock. Thona smiled faintly and said, All right, you guys stop scaring Alice. Tell us, since that wizard found us through you, he wants us to help him deal with the Tier 4 dragon in there? Alice let out a helpless, bitter laugh, and nodded silently in agreement. Although she had the ability to control the power of destiny, it was still not enough to spy on a Tier 4 witch. Tier 4 witches already had the powerful ability to destroy the world, and their understanding and control of the plane's laws was not something a cat like her could compare to. Moreover, to be able to become a witch leader, which one of them had not experienced thousands of years of bloodshed and scheming. How could her self-righteous little tricks and thoughts escape the eyes and ears of these old foxes? Therefore, Alice no longer spoke empty words and pretended to be sincere. Instead, she used real benefits as bait and launched a thrilling negotiation with several Tier 4 witch leaders. In the end, both sides reached a basic cooperation agreement. The Crimson family, led by Alice and Grimm, regularly opened up the lance plane they controlled to the witch factions in front of them, allowing the powerful witches to capture dragon pets. Correspondingly, the Death, Darkness, and Ashen witch factions also had to respect the Crimson family's control over the lance plane. They had to strictly follow the Crimson family's established procedures to enter and exit the lance plane, and they could not destroy the original ecosystem of the lance plane. In addition, for every successful capture of a dragon pet, the witch who was the victim had to pay a large amount of magic crystals or resources as compensation according to the agreement. After this series of agreements was signed, it meant that the Crimson family had conditionally opened up the lance plane to the 3 witch factions and recruited some powerful fighters. Of course, the price the Crimson family had to pay was the powerful pure-blooded dragon in the lance plane. The Dragon Lord was there, and as long as you had the strength, you could go and capture it. If you caught it, the dragon would belong to the witch, and the dragon nest and territory would belong to the Crimson family. The witch only had to pay a corresponding amount of magic crystals as compensation. No matter how one looked at it, this was a guaranteed profit without any cost. After the agreement was signed, Alice brought up the information related to their target, the Blue Sky Wing Skyryl. With the dragon trader Thunder Dragon arms around, the secrets that Grimm had been unable to find out about in the past were no longer a secret to him. In terms of the dragon lineage, the Sorcerer World's way of categorizing them was obviously different from other worlds. The so-called Blue Sky Wing Skyryl was actually a blue dragon, which was also known as a wind dragon by the sorcerers. This type of dragon was adept at controlling the power of the wind, and it had the fastest flying speed among all the dragons. Therefore, if one wanted to capture or kill a wind dragon, the first thing they had to pay attention to was how to limit its terrifying speed. However, it was not Grimm's turn to worry about these problems. Instead, it became the biggest problem for the witch leaders. After obtaining detailed information about this Grade 4 dragon, the Dark Witch Circe and the Pale Witch Sylvia chose to give up one after another. only the undead, which Thuna's eyes flickered, showing great interest. Since this grade 4 dragon was not their cup of tea, Circe and Sylvia took their leave. However, before they left their contact details with each other. Circe naturally preferred shadow-type dragons, such as the Night Shadow Dragon, Black Dragon, or Void Dragon. Sylvia, on the other hand, preferred ice dragons and spectral dragons. Before she left, Circe, the leader of the Dark Witches, turned around and gave Alice a meaningful look. Although I don't like you very much, from now on, I will no longer participate in the dispute between you and the first Witch of Destiny. From now on, you don't have to worry about me secretly attacking you. With that, Circe left without looking back. Hearing this, Alice's tightly clenched fists finally loosened. All this while, she had been vigilant against the open and hidden attacks from other witch factions. Even those witches who were the kindest to her, she did not dare to easily trust them. The main reason for this was the existence of the first Destiny Witch. According to the trajectory of the past battles for Destiny, Alice was destined to die in the Tower of Destiny. And everything she had would become the nourishment needed for the growth of the new Destiny Witch clone. However, it was precisely because of her existence that the plans of the first Destiny Witch, who had planned all this tens of thousands of years ago, came to nothing. From the moment Alice became the official leader of the Destiny Witches, she had become a thorn in the side of some big shot in the void. If not for the protection of the Sorcerer World's will, Alice would have long since become a skeleton in a grave, killed by the extremely powerful first Destiny Witch's schemes. The reason Alice was still alive was not because she was intelligent, nor was it because the enemy could not do anything to her, but because the enemy needed her alive. It could be imagined that even if the first Destiny Witch used some means to kill Alice, the immense power of Destiny Alice had gathered would only return to the Sorcerer World. It would not bring her any benefits. However, if she allowed Alice to grow, when Alice reached the 4th grade, she would have to step out of the Sorcerer World sooner or later. At that time, a delicious fruit would grow, and she would only need to gently pluck it to obtain everything Alice currently had. In this way, although there were some deviations from the plan, the result was exactly the same. Therefore, during this period of time, the first Destiny Witch had also been secretly using some means to control and guide Alice's development, but she had no intention of killing her. However, when it came to those who could interfere with Alice's development, the first Destiny Witch was unprecedentedly ruthless and ruthless. This could be seen from Grimm's unexpected misfortune. Since Circe had already expressed her stance, it meant that the entire Dark Witches would no longer intervene in the internal disputes between the two Destiny Witches. No matter what, this was a huge piece of good news for Alice. If she could remove or use the power nodes that the Destiny Witches had placed in the plane one by one, it would allow Alice to regain a certain advantage in this unbalanced confrontation. After getting such a guarantee, Alice finally smiled comfortably. Thona was not interested in investigating the little secret between Circe and Alice. She was more interested in the internal environment and strange laws of the Plane of Lance. Only by considering all of this in advance would she have a greater chance of capturing the Blue Sky Wing. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.